Well, this sure is something new. I never do this for video series. But my podcast buddy Dorkax wouldn't quit begging me, just throwing himself at my feet to mush my shit together the whole time I was editing my Pikmin 4 review. So here we are. Hopefully it pays off. I got some ground rules before we roll film though. They all apply to me. Don't get too stressed out, please. I want this to feel like additive content. Like I didn't just want to edit my stuff together and call it a day. Like I wanted there to be something extra after all the other vids. So between each review, I'll give some retrospective or behind the scenes chit chat, or I'll just like roast myself from 3 years ago. That's all. Feel free to use chapters and stuff that jump around, but yeah, let's revisit my Pikmin 1, 2, 3 Bloom reviews in my new Pikmin 4 video. Not my first Pikmin 1 video. That one is famously old, bogus, and whack. Hey everybody, this is the first in a series of 3 videos on the Pikmin series, so obviously we're taking a look at the first game. This is gonna be so hard to get through. Anyway, sorry, I'll see you on the other side for real this time. Pikmin was released for the GameCube in 2001 as Nintendo's attempt at a real-time strategy game. Having evolved from a project that took elements from the Super Mario 128 tech demo titled Adam and Eve, it eventually changed into its current form after the team got a group of characters to carry something together. It's also a notable piece of history as one of Shigeru Miyamoto's last pet projects, as he stepped away from being the main director and producer of the Mario and Zelda series after the N64 era, leaving them in other hands. At the time of this game's release, he even said, and I quote, "The next Mario is Pikmin." Now that's obviously not true because Pikmin is niche as flip, which will also be the quote on my gravestone. It still holds a special place in many hardcore Nintendo fans' hearts, including my own though. However, I didn't play it until a couple of years ago, where I picked up the Wii port at a random GameStop. I have the crappy artless cover, which super peeves me off, because Pikmin turned out to be the most impressive game I'd ever played at the time. And over 2 years and a bajillion new games later, it stayed consistently high up there. Now, I started using the Izzy-Doodle branding about 3 years ago, which feels wild to say. I don't usually stick with projects this long. My writing, drawing, animation, and editing skills have improved, maybe exponentially. I don't know if it's quantifiable, but I think they've gotten better, which is what matters most. But since I've gotten better, I think this is a good chance to pay an even better tribute to one of my favorite games and one of my fave series as a whole. It's time for a Pikmin Redo long-form review. Pikmin's story is very simple and is successfully kicked off with a single movie. Captain Olimar's ship, the SS Dolphin, gets bonked on its soft spot by a space rock and breaks into 30 parts, which fall onto the planet below, along with the captain himself. After waking up at the impact site, he further explains that this alien world has poisonous oxygen in its atmosphere, and he's only got 30 in-game days before he keels over. Dang. After shuffling around for a bit, he'll discover the first onion, meet the red Pikmin, one of 3 types he can use in this adventure, and say hundreds of words trying to explain this new gameplay style to the player. You'll collect your first few pellets and pluck some more Pikmin, which allows you to make them push this box as a team, and with a bit more harvesting you can get the engine back to the Dolphin, meaning you can leave the planet's surface and go to explore other areas. I'm a bit torn on how to critique this. I think the simplest way to explain how I feel about this tutorial is that I think it's really good at teaching the basic actions the player can do, but I have a couple nitpicks. It's structured to show you how to use Pikmin to make more Pikmin and to get them to perform basic tasks, and it does so in a not very overwhelming way. That's dope, and I think it does a good job of what it sets out to do. However, I have two thoughts on how to make it slightly even better. As the game is now, the huge bar at the top of the screen showing how much of the day is left doesn't show up or get explained until day 2. I think it would be possible to, well, not to introduce the time limit, but to introduce the idea of time passing on the first day. That way Olimar could quickly remark on the actual passage of time on the second day, and on the first, discuss the passage of time as a general aesthetic concept, like it becomes afternoon once you have 10 Pikmin, and becomes evening once you're carrying the engine, or something like that. It would introduce the idea before actually ramping it up the next day, so the player would have it on their minds before just being presented with it point blank. Olimar's really freaking chatty during this whole tutorial, so they could have fit it in somewhere. That's the other thing. Olimar does all this talking, over-explaining the camera controls, and not explaining how to best use swarming at all? Listen, the camera controls are not that important besides centering the camera. I literally barely ever change the viewpoint on purpose. I usually accidentally do it when I'm trying to swarm, ironically. The player should know about centering the camera, but they absolutely need to be properly taught about swarming, so make the camera angles an optional journal. Maybe the devs thought about it already and came to the conclusion about all this and changed it after trying to implement what I just talked about. And like I said, as far as teaching you how to use the Pikmin for harvesting, moving obstacles, and carrying things, this is a fantastic lesson session, but those are just my thoughts on how to make it that much more effective. At any rate, the main parts of this game's gameplay are made clear on this first day. Olimar's controls and the Pikmin are what's right in your face, but the basics of the big open levels are also shown off, and the day system could have been handled better, but it's at least teased by the big end of day fanfare. But the aesthetic things matter too. The art style, graphics, music, writing, it's all super important to Pikmin's brilliance. So let's dive in then. What's Pikmin all about? Before I talk about Olimar's actions and how they feel to do and everything, let's talk about the controller. Pikmin was originally released on the GameCube. However, it was later re-released on the Wii as part of the new Play Control line of games. I know, how wacky is that? But the thing is, the Wii Remote is perfect for Pikmin. I can't speak from any real experience actually playing the GameCube version, but in my opinion, having more direct control over the game you're playing is usually better than having less. And the Wii controls allow you to do just that by assigning this little circle thing to the Wiimote's IR pointer, meaning you can move Olimar and swarm your Pikmin at the same time, or throw the Pikmin to a more specific position. It does cause some teeny tiny inconveniences, as the pointer will slightly jiggle as you move the controller on accident while mashing the A button, but other than that, this setup works great. Now onto Olimar. Olimar is an interesting piece to this game's puzzle because he serves as the stand-in for the classic, iconic RTS cursor. Most real-time strategy games have a god pointer stand in for you as you click to micromanage your units. In Pikmin, Olimar has a pointer cursor ringy thingy attached to him, but he's a character in the world. He can take damage from enemies, he has to physically move around obstacles, and you have to take real time to cross the stages between groups of Pikmin. But what's of main importance is how he interacts with the Pikmin. So here's the lowdown. Your plant platoon follows you around, so Olimar can toss them to get them to interact with things by where they land. To get them to follow you again, you can whistle them back to your side from a distance. You can dismiss them to sort specific types or get any stragglers to work on something. And you can use that swarm ability I've mentioned like 80 million times to lead the entire group and get them around or on top of something. While near an onion, you can put Pikmin back inside or pull more out and pluck recently sprouted ones from the ground. This is a solid list of moves and they all feel good to perform, and it balances things out to make Olimar as useful as possible without making the Pikmin feel like a gimmick. There are some tricks the game doesn't tell you about though. First of all, in most cases, Olimar taking damage means almost nothing. Unless you get set on fire a few times, you can literally survive the worst this planet's wildlife has or have to offer. I have no idea which tense to use in that sentence. When you don't have any Pikmin, you can also use the throw move as a weak attack. Now, it's very unlikely Olimar throwing hands is going to kill anything, but you can use this to get enemies to focus on you instead of chasing your working Pikmin, so some of these parts are a real team effort. Olimar's actions are well placed on the controller as well. The throw, whistle, and dismissal are mapped to A, B, and C respectively. Swarming is bound to the down arrow on the D-pad, and like I said, the pointer is the pointer, and vice versa. I am killing it with the wordplay today. But there are some issues with the controls, namely with the camera views. Pressing Z to center the camera works fine. I mean, it's centering the camera. But the game also has various zoom levels and tries to make use of both top-down and 3/4 perspectives, which are put on the other 3 arrows on the D-pad. And with how small that thing is compared to the average Druman thumb, you will find yourself accidentally hitting those arrows, well, not all the time, but enough to make a note of it and write a paragraph on it in, say, like a YouTube review or something. Maybe with like a run-on sentence in the script so you can show multiple instances of this happening. Yeah, that sounds about right. Overall, the controls are excellent though, and highlight an interesting take on the player's role in an RTS. The Pikmin really are at the heart of everything. The game's named after them, so they're obviously the entire point of the gameplay. You control a squadron of up to 100 of the little guys and get them to carry, fight, multiply, maybe accidentally get eaten, destroy, build, destroy, climb to new locations. Yeah, you get the point. They can do a lot of different things. But the most important things all of them can do are carrying things back to base, sucking at fighting, and getting hands-on with other types of objects in the environment. Carrying is by far the most common thing you'll have them do. After grabbing something, a Pikmin will head back to wherever that something belongs. This is important for harvesting and for recovering ship parts. When it comes to ship parts, it's easy. They just all make a beeline back to the ship. Boom, thing gotten, progress made. When it comes to harvesting, you can either use the pellets from flowers or dead enemies to produce more Pikmin seeds. Just one of the many reasons this game is low-key metal. It gets a bit more complicated as the game quickly introduces color and weight into the mix. Essentially, an item's weight is the minimum amount of Pikmin needed to carry something. For example, a dwarf Bulborb has a weight of 3, so you need 3 Pikmin to carry it back. But which onion will it go to? Well, that's where color comes in, as the color majority of the Pikmin carrying it determines where it will go to. Using the same example, if 3 yellow Pikmin grab that same dwarf Bulborb corpse, it will go to the yellow onion. However, if 2 blue Pikmin and 1 red Pikmin all carry it together, it would go to the blue onion because they're the majority. These are all intuitive concepts, it just might take you a little bit of experimentation to get the hang of it. With some more minor experimentation, you'll learn that you can add a bunch more carriers to make them go faster. What's that? You want to make them go even faster? Well, let's rip some fat grass, or whatever the kids say these days. I quit paying attention to slang after the dab happened. In the grass is this nectar stuff, which will transform the Pikmin from leaves into flowers, making them faster and stronger. While you can only have up to 100 out of the onion at any given time, which is fine, because any more would make the game way too easy and probably laggy. The game is understanding and increases the Pikmin inside the onions even when there's too many outside. That means you have plenty of ways to grow your army, which is good if you're great at building up a surplus or if you goofed up and need to quickly recover some troops, or both, like me. I also saw this goofy glitch where the counters signifying your Pikmin totals got misaligned, so let's all take a moment to laugh at the video game. Ready? Alright, 3, 2, 1. Dude, this... Alright, thanks for following along at home. These troops are just alright at fighting, which seems unfortunate, but it's actually pretty interesting because it means combat in Pikmin is about fighting smarter, not harder. You can bonk the dwarf Bulborbs on the head to instantly kill them by bashing their brains in. You can easily beat bigger Bulborbs by sneaking up on them from behind and swarming them, except for when that doesn't work for some reason. You can get around enemies by distracting them with Olimar's weaker attacks, you know, that kind of thing. Having as many Pikmin as possible will make fights easier, but not always cakewalks. And while getting caught in a pinch can remind you you're on the bottom of the food chain here, putting in the effort to think and observe for a bit before rushing in can help you gain the upper hand. I will say this doesn't always feel like a balanced dynamic. When I returned to the Forest of Hope after getting the blue Pikmin from the Forest Navel, the Bulborbs were way tougher to kill, which felt kind of cool because it was like the game was getting harder as I went along. But then when I went to the Distant Spring, the Bulbears were so easy to KO, so I'm really baffled if this was intentional or not. I mean, it's definitely not as intentional feeling as the other flaws this game has, but we'll get there in a sec. The other actions the Pikmin can perform are stuff like tearing down walls, building bridges and stick ladders, pushing a couple boxes, busting open geysers, that kind of thing. These things may sound boring because you're not doing them like in most games, so it seems at first you just have to stand there and watch your thembos work. But it doesn't take more than 2 brain cells to realize you can make different groups of Pikmin do different tasks in different places at the same time. This is where the different color types make their distinctions the most clear. Red Pikmin are the strongest fighters and are resistant to fire, so you can have them do most of the fighting or carry stuff out of areas bursting with flames. Yellow Pikmin can carry bomb rocks and be tossed higher than the others, so you can use them to nab things out of reach, bomb groups of enemies, and break concrete walls. The blue Pikmin can breathe underwater, so you can take them into huge chunks of the map that the other Pikmin would throw a hissy fit about. So as you can see, there's a lot of layers to Pikmin, even at its most basic levels. However, it never feels as overwhelming as all my words probably just made it sound. Using Olimar to get different groups of Pikmin to accomplish multiple goals by making use of their numbers and powers is all it is, which is a unique and solid premise. If I had to sum it up, I'd say Pikmin's gameplay is all about symbiosis, which ties into the game's greater focus on nature. Olimar is a smart but weak dude all alone, commanding 100 powerful morons. Even if you don't really get everything at first, you can scrape by understanding that idea. The only real obstacle to the total success of this formula is the Pikmin themselves. This is where the game starts to show its infantile nature. The first time making a game like this is going to have the most slip-ups. And the biggest slip-up of many is the Pikmin's dumbest plants AI. They're programmed to randomly trip at times, and since they'll also get snagged on corners or walls, that means you need to stop and wait for them to catch up. Speaking of which, the leaf Pikmin are so slow and lag behind so much, you'll constantly be waiting for them to regroup. And in this game, the Pikmin also tend to spread out for some reason. Not only is that annoying because they have to be physically right next to you to be thrown, which slows you down, it also means whenever they get blown around or set on fire, it can be close to impossible to whistle them back, which means a lot of Pikmin deaths. Not that they listen to you anyway, sometimes it takes multiple whistles to get them to pay attention to you at all. Yuck! All of these things will really build up over the course of a typical playthrough, and I don't think that it's that this game is really aged. GameCube games don't really age in the gameplay department. It's very polished for what it is. If it wasn't, this wouldn't be a game I'd want to revisit ever in my life. But the moment-to-moment gameplay has a lot of things to focus on improving in future entries. Once you get to grips with the unique gameplay, you'll probably start paying a little more attention to the game's main themes. When you think about nature, it's easy to only think of some pretty flowers, some grass blowing in the wind, or how relaxing it is to watch rain patter down. But the truth is, there are tons of animals out there, and even though they don't understand why they're doing things like hunting for prey, or flopping down and taking a nap in the middle of the day, they're out there following their instincts, they're surviving. And in a word, that is nature. And Pikmin is a game all about nature, all about that serenity and the harshness, kind of a yin-yang sort of deal, and it really shines through in all the game's presentation. Each of the game's areas are made to be as photorealistic as the GameCube could handle. Sure, the textures are old and the geometry is more jagged than it would be in actual outside land, but it still sells a world that feels natural. This is helped by the use of very subdued, dare I say, earthy colors. Grass and leaves are darker greens, the dirt is a very dry tan, and even the water has a pale, barely blue hue. Objects you can interact with, like the bridges, walls, and cans, use far more striking but still real feeling colors to draw you in. All of this helps sell the world as a real place, and the presence of weird stuff like the giant cans, cardboard boxes, rusty metal structures, and a giant bottle guide the player towards realizing this place is Earth? We don't know about the true state of it quite yet. We have to wait a little bit more to figure that one out. But the great thing about the backgrounds being as realistic as they can be is that this helps you focus on the gameplay by drawing attention to the candy-colored characters dotting the landscapes. Every living thing in this game uses bright palettes that catch your eye as soon as you look at them. This is most obvious with the Pikmin themselves as they're just primary colors, but even when you have 100 of them, they manage to stick out. Each of the other creatures do this as well, which I really love. The character design as a whole just never misses in this game. Sure, each of the animals look cartoony and alien, but they also have believable anatomy, and their difficulty can also be determined by their size and design. It creates a believable ecosystem. They all also have unique behaviors that further immerse you into the world. Bulborbs and Bulbears sleep and allow you to sneak up on them. The fiery and puffy blowhogs will either set your guys on fire or blow them around. And Wollywogs will belly flop to try and crush the Pikmin. There are several boss enemies, but they're usually not placed in arenas, or they're not made a big deal of. They just kind of show up and you have to be the fittest to survive. Naturally, I wiped the floor with all of them this time. But the point is, they feel like animals just being at the top of their food chains. They all have great sound design too, from the Pikmin's various little noises as they work to all the enemies. My favorite part of this game is after you get the good ending and you get to watch this freaking sick FMV where each of the creatures are directly given names and described in a biological manner. It also just really cracks me up how the person playing in the footage had to actively get the Pikmin tortured to show off what these creatures can do. This juxtapositional tone of hope overcoming bleak circumstances can be seen, or read I guess, in all the monologues from Olimar. He always gives little blurbs whenever you find a new part describing its use or something about his life relating to it. He also gives little journal entries at the end of each day. The journals sometimes give hints and tips, but sometimes Olimar just straight up bears his little heart and talks about how he's freaked out by watching some of the Pikmin die that day, or how much he misses his wife and kids. You can hear similar things when grabbing parts. It's hard to believe that this guy, out of anybody, is one of the most developed Nintendo characters of all time. There's a great balance here. Olimar feels like his situation is always looking up, and that he'll live to go home again, but he's always aware that he's in a situation where he needs to stay vigilant and figure out how to survive. And like I said, that balance is part of the entirety of this whole game. The world is full of beautiful imagery and cute characters and fun gameplay, but enemies can swallow your Pikmin whole, killing them, or you can kill them and turn their corpse into new seeds. You could be having a chill time, then the looming threat of sundown slaps you in the face. If you leave any stray Pikmin behind, they're chased and eaten by nocturnal predators. If Olimar dies or a color of Pikmin goes extinct, that progress is gone. Whoops. That's nature. Despite the scary parts though, the beauty of this world is always at the forefront, and the music is a great reminder of that. The music in this game was composed by Hajime Wakai, who would end up having a very established pedigree at Nintendo, working as one of the main co-composers of various Zelda titles, and even becoming a sound director for that series and Pikmin. To me, he has a distinctly whimsical style and really knows how to pick good instruments that fit the scene, which is very evident here. Pikmin has a very bouncy soundtrack that balances the weirdness with the wonder of this world, as can be heard in the theme for the Impact site, which really sells Olimar's curiosity even in the face of deadly slim survival odds. I think my favorite thing that Wakai pulled off in this soundtrack is a heavy use of dynamic tracks. Each stage has its main track, and a second variation for when you're near working Pikmin or when you're fighting enemies. On top of that, Wakai also made a whole second version of the song for when evening approaches. How cool is that? I like the working track for the Forest of Hope and the evening version of the Forest Navel the very best. There's also several other jingles that I really enjoy that reward you for making tiny bits of progress, and make your little successes that much more palpable. After doing your best and getting a good haul, that last one is literally my favorite thing to hear. With such a dense set of main action-based mechanics to get to grips with, the obvious question is, how do the designers put those to the test? They do so in two major ways. There are obviously the main stages, which are fascinatingly designed to squish together multiple design philosophies. But before we dive into that, I want to talk about the day system, which I find equally as interesting. As we explained in the tutorial day, we have 30 in-game days before Olimar kicks the comically oversized bucket, and with the addition of the timer at the top of the screen during each day spent exploring, you're given about 13 minutes to do whatever you want in whichever stage you landed in for the day. So if we do some quick math, the maximum time you have to beat this game is... 390 total minutes, or 6.5 hours. So that's not a very long game, but that number will continually get smaller when some microcosmic factors come into play. Since there are 30 ship parts and 30 days, your starting plan will probably be to nab one ship part per day. Not a bad idea while you're still getting into the swing of things, but that plan will definitely change pretty fast for a few reasons. Carrying parts and doing tasks takes time and resources, and fighting enemies that are in the way will potentially cost you time and the lives of your soldiers. All of these struggles may take you a while to overcome, but the maps are only moderately sized, so it's not going to take you 13 whole minutes for most of these parts on their own, aside for maybe the ones that are inside enemies. Obviously, the most logical new plan, whether you're struggling or have some extra time on your hands then, is to try and scout out multiple parts each day. Once you get the whimsical radar, you'll see how tightly packed a lot of the parts actually are, along with other various geographical features. This should crank your brain gears into 5th gear as you end up trying to efficiently manage multiple groups of Pikmin to get as many parts as you can in a single day. That's what's so great about this game. I mean, mostly everything is, but its short length combined with this drive to get faster and faster keeps me coming back again and again. This review's footage is my 4th playthrough, and as we can see from the endgame tally, I've been slowly whittling down my time on the planet. My first run took me 22 days, so I worked it down to 18, 16, and then 15. Evidently I wasn't very careful this time though, and I lost a lot of guys this time. Every playthrough is a chance to be that much more efficient, and I will never get sick of it. The biggest change from the GameCube version other than the controls is the addition of being able to return to any previous day to redo it. Honestly, I think that's a great addition and I haven't seen anybody really argue against it. Sure, it takes away from the tough luck nature of the game like 0.0001%, but it's a great accessibility change that makes the game less demanding, and it feels like at least part of the game wants you to survive to the end. Pikmin's level design is an interesting mashup of early 3D Mario and early 3D Zelda's concepts. It borrows the idea of having multiple major collectibles spread around each stage from Super Mario 64. However, unlike that game, you are going to be doing absolutely zero platforming. You are going to be putting your big brain to work and accomplishing each of these objectives, making each level feel like a big Zelda dungeon. These stages don't have definitive beginnings and ends though. The ship parts are all self-contained and pretty well separated, so as we can see, Pikmin meets up somewhere in the middle, Venn diagrammically speaking. Each of the game's 5 areas are all unique, iconic, challenging, and most importantly, fun. So let's rip them open one by one and see what makes them tick. The impact site is the area we explored on the first tutorial day. However, you can return once you have all 3 types of Pikmin to grab another part from the munching clam. I think the most notable thing about this area is the abundance of pellets, especially ones that create huge amounts of seeds, like holy crap. This place was clearly created to be a safe space for you to build up your army, which is a great way to get players to revisit this place after day 1, besides just nabbing another part. The Forest of Hope is arguably this game's most iconic locale and the first fully fleshed out level. It starts a trend of these larger areas placing you in the center, allowing you to head whichever direction you want once you get going. When you first land, pretty much every path is blocked off by walls. You'll only be able to break down these wooden walls at first, but once you unlock the yellow Pikmin, you'll be able to fully open up the level and explore to your heart's content. Most of the enemies here are Bulborbs, which aren't really a threat with a big enough army. The burrowing Snagret, the game's words not mine, is by far one of the game's most challenging fights, with it popping out of the ground to peck at you. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit terrified by it. But it has a really unique design and a unique tactic to beating it, which is great. The Forest Navel is a dark hole full of even tougher predators. A lot of players seem to think this is the best area in the game, and I agree. Your Pikmin's skills will all be put to the test here. The yellow's high tosses and bomb carrying, the red's resistance to fire honestly makes them the MVP of this area, and you'll find the blue Pikmin in this area too. Their ability to explore underwater really comes in handy here. There's a part that puts all of these skills to use. You'll need to get the blue Pikmin to activate a geyser to propel Olimar, toss the yellow Pikmin up high to grab the part, and then use the reds to carry the part back to base without getting lit up. The beady Longlegs fight is also here, but my favorite part is the Puffstool fight, since his spores can transform your little guys into dangerous mushroom zombies. I also like the thieving breadbug, which you can do a tug of war with to take him out. Overall, the Forest Navel is a well-crafted level that well balances required use of all your skills and has a creepy atmosphere that is only enhanced by the increased difficulty. The distant spring is where the blue Pikmin really get their time to shine because more than half of this freaking map is covered in water. The place is swarming with super powerful predators too. Oh, and it has a third of all the ship parts. Yeah, 10 out of 30. So despite how daunting it is, you better get to work, little buddy. Even though the blues are the real heroes here, the red Pikmin will be a huge help in combat against a lot of the crazy hard guys, and the yellows can help bust down walls as usual. This level also has some puzzles that are still basic. I mean, this is a game about planning, not solving after all, but they do take some more thought compared to the other parts. I like the one that uses the otherwise optional candy pop buds to switch Pikmin types in the middle of the level in order to get it. Not to mention our special friend, the Smoky Prog. This dusty creature is only able to be seen if you get to the distant spring before day 15, and they will literally melt your Pikmin into ghosts. They're bar none the hardest creature to take head on. The final trial is Olimar's final trial. His words, not mine. This is the definitive end of the game. It only has one part, and you can only travel here once you have all 29 other parts. This level is just a straight path full of micro puzzles that put all your Pikmin to use one last time before you fight the King Bullblacks as a final boss. They can be made a pushover by having a yellow Pikmin die for the cause, but they're a tough foe regardless because of their wide-ranged attacks and surprisingly swift enactment of said attacks. Once you beat him, you can carry the piggy bank back and book it out of there. The end. Remember X minutes ago when I said each of the game's 5 areas are all unique, iconic, challenging, and most importantly fun? Well, that's what I just talked about, so this is the end of the section. Oh, before I forget, I need to devote some time to the game's extra little single-player mode, challenge mode it's called. Your goal here is to grow as many Pikmin as possible within a single in-game day, which can be tried as many times as you want. Your scores will be ranked by the game, you can do all the 5 main areas, and this is so boring. You can't even earn anything for getting a high score. There's no reason to play this more than once for the sake of curiosity. So while it's certainly like an idea for a little something extra to do with Pikmin, it really doesn't amount to anything, making it by default the worst part of this game. It is a side mode though, so it doesn't subtract anything from the main game at all. Like I said way earlier, this game has multiple endings. It's actually the only game in the series to do so in such a big way, and as you might guess, which ending cutscene you get to watch is determined by how many parts you get. If you goof up and get barely any by the end of day 30, Olimar dies and gets turned into a hybrid Pikmin sprout. Gosh, that's morbid. Throughout the game, Olimar keeps suggesting you probably don't need every part to take off, so in another more basic ending, Olimar just ditches the Pikmin and leaves, which is dumb and sad and feels very out of character for him. The best ending is similar, but it's after you collect all 30 parts whenever you get them. So Olimar says goodbye and then takes off. It seems like the Pikmin are learning how to take care of themselves better though. Maybe they won't stay on the bottom of the food chain now. As Olimar takes off for planet Hocotate, finally able to see his family again, we see a ton of different onions trying to follow after him, some of which haven't even appeared in any games so far. It's a triumphant ending that teases that there's more to this world, but it still feels like a perfect, happy little ending. The bad ending is worth seeing because of how silly it is, but the best ending is the best because it gives the player something to aspire to, and it feels the most rewarding to achieve. This game is so close to perfection, and that's why it stayed one of my favorites over the last few years. I hope my over-thoroughness has shown how every single bit of the design fits together like a Pikmin-themed puzzle. Olimar's skills are balanced to make the Pikmin useful, and all the Pikmin types are well distinguished. Each of the levels are made to have an open structure that well separates each of the objectives. The day system gives you a time limit that's long enough to encourage you to multitask, but short enough to create excellent tension. The world is beautiful and cute, but like in real life, there are scary things that are just trying to live their lives. Its efficiency-driven gameplay means that you can play it over and over again and try to do better next time, and that's worked on me. Yeah, it's not perfect. The Pikmin's AI isn't the smartest, the camera controls lead to a bit of frustration, and the challenge mode is the most tacked on thing ever. But I love this game's weird tone, its gorgeous world, its threatening enemies, and that's why I critique it. I'm in love with it. Pikmin 1 is a great first attempt at a new type of game. And even with all its stumblings, its structure is enough to make it a worthwhile experience. It may be niche's flip, but it's my niche. If you watch this whole video without having played Pikmin yet, I can totally recommend it. But if it hasn't struck your fancy, stick around maybe. We might find your niche at some point on this journey. Oh my god, it feels like I'm coming up for air after being trapped underwater. That wasn't quite as bad as I remembered it being. Like, most of my current style is there, animated character, trying to add art wherever I could, writing using alliteration, puns, incorporating vertical quotes and stims, and self-deprecation. I think the main thing to really remember when watching these things is how I was a very different person, even just 3 years ago. I just wasn't in any supportive environment really, so I had like zero confidence. So that gentle kind of humble discussion about how far I'd come and trying to gently encourage people to check out the game is just truly not who I am. Like, I love being kind, obviously, but I am just far more of a forward, blunt person, and I'm also very crass. I do not have wholesome humor. And that's just me. It's completely fine to admit that. I've been rapidly changing as I enter adulthood, especially after college, because I finally have a lot of freedom. So I think that's where a lot of my fear of a rewatch came from. My style's also just changed so much since then. I fully redesigned my avatar a couple times and tried to ditch the curved surfaces in favor of more triangular edges, and now I don't even use the colored pencil look because I want to focus more on solid colors. And the audio editing and pacing of my videos has gotten a lot faster over time, since that's something I've always been drawn to in the films that I really enjoy, so I try to emulate that in my writing and editing. Everything slows to a crawl in these older vids, and I'm so glad that I changed that. Now things can be longer without me feeling like I'm wasting my audience's time. That's all I want to talk about for now, so let's get into the Pikmin 2 vid. Pikmin 1 turned out to be one of my favorite games of all time, so much so that I immediately ran over to my computer, got onto Amazon, and ordered the next game for the Wii, this time with the amazingly detailed box art. Fortunately, back in the day, fans didn't have to wait very long after the original game was released in 2001 either. It came out late in the year, so it was only about a 2-year wait and some change before a direct sequel came along in early 2004. This new game reviewed very well. However, as time has gone on, it's actually managed to divide the fan base quite a bit. This time, the game boasted even larger environments, new Pikmin types, and 2 captains. But Pikmin already had such an incredible formula. All I really wanted to see from a sequel was better AI for the Pikmin themselves, and maybe some slightly improved controls for the Wii Remote, and a better challenge-based mode. I hadn't even considered the possibilities that putting a second captain on the table might have. All in all, this was shaping up to be a very promising follow-up to one of my very favorite games. But with how split it makes people's opinions, did that turn out to be the case? Well, let's find out, because it's time for a Pikmin 2 long-form review. Oh my god, that rhymed. This game is a lot more ambitious in a lot of ways, and so its opening movie has to explain some longer information. Basically, Olimar's planetary stranding in the first game took place during a short vacation of his. After escaping the planet, he returns home and goes to work immediately, where it turns out his job, Hokate Interplanetary Freight, has accumulated some debt. Like over 100 years' pay worth of debt. The president was going to try to auction off some assets, but it turns out all they have is the SS Dolphin. You know, Olimar's ship that he owns. How'd they even get in that much debt in the first place? Well, our boy Louie was delivering some gold-plated carrots, and they got eaten by a space bunny. So now everyone is screwed. Things start looking up immediately though when a souvenir Olimar brought back from the planet turns out to be worth 100 whole Pokos. Yes, that is the name of the money. You're just gonna have to go with it. So Olimar is sent back by the president with Louie in tow to scoop up as much treasure as they can find in order to save the company. On arrival though, Louie gets knocked out of his seat, which leads into our first tutorial day. There are 2 this time, oh boy. The first day uses Olimar and Louie's separation to slowly introduce a lot of the same concepts from last time. Olimar whistles the Pikmin to his side and tosses them to get them to fight this dwarf Bulborb. Then Louie is switched to, showing off how to swap between the 2 characters, while also introducing the onion and harvesting pellets. Once the 2 captains are reunited, Swarming is reintroduced to retrieve our first treasure, a straight-up Duracell battery. The second day will give you a chance to do some more combat and harvesting. It teaches you about breaking down walls, and then ends with an introduction to the new caves. This first one, the Emergence Cave, is only 2 floors, introduces some more treasures and the existence of treasures that can grant new abilities, and it adds in the first of the new Pikmin types in this game. After finishing up, you get catapulted back to the surface, and the next day you can start exploring a new area so you can really get into the swing of things. This intro is so exhausting. I probably just explained everything about it in like a minute, maybe 2, but it takes almost an hour to really get through because of the darn ship. In the last game, Olimar wouldn't shut up in the tutorial, but at least you could speed through that text if you wanted, and it didn't stop everything for more than a few seconds. In this tutorial, everything comes to a screeching halt whenever literally anything happens. Sometimes it's charming, but more often than not, the game freezes for the ship to do its obnoxious siren at you, and then give you a robo-snarky explanation of whatever it's trying to teach you. It never lets up either. Whistle Pikmin, it talks. Meet a Pikmin, it talks. Pluck a seed, it talks. Walk up to the cave, it talks. Collect an enemy, it talks. What happened to Olimar's pleasant introspections from last time? Why isn't he talking? And what's Louie's take on things? Well, it turns out they're both mute in this game, which is a huge step down from last time. The ship, being a robotic capitalist, would make it a great foil to Olimar's personality and Louie's inherent weirdness. I mean, look at him, what a creep. We do get to hear from both characters in the Piklopedia, where Olimar describes the creatures as a scientist and Louie describes how he would prepare them in a meal, which is one of the best features in the series, by the way. But I want to see what the captains think of the treasure they find. I want to hear their thoughts on their expedition. The ship has plenty of personality, especially with all the oddball names it gives to the treasures, but I think it's a bit too one note to carry a 12-hour game. Anyways, that's the tutorial, a middle-of-the-road start to a new Pikmin adventure. I will say I enjoy how each little moment is scored with unique little jingles. But it's paced so slowly and squeezes your hand so much that it knocks the wind out of the opening. Hopefully it picks up the pace, but let's let the rest of the game speak for itself. Aw, dang it, spaceship! Oh boy. Pikmin 2 is what we in the fan industry like to call a pretty quick sequel. Instead of starting from scratch with a new visual and physics engine, the team used the first game's engine and plenty of things like character behaviors and level creation tools as a base and added things onto it. This makes Pikmin 2 immensely polished compared to its rough around the edges predecessor, and it gave them the chance to add a lot of gameplay improvements. They also expanded the new Pikmin universe in a number of ways, making it feel feel fully realized in a product that out-alives the first game, honestly. I mean, the amount of personality added to this game is brain-busting. UI-related objects like text boxes and save prompts and various progress graphs have been spruced up to the point of perfection, all having bouncy effects that suit the wacky nature of the characters. But what's even better is the amount of ways the characters get to express themselves. Like I mentioned, the ship pipes up a bit, and even though I'd rather hear from literally anyone else during gameplay every once in a while, it has frankly hilarious dialogue. It could have made a great foil, but that's besides the point. Its implications of just pretending not to care and being able to physically feeling things and having unnecessary types of scanners are all LOL moments, as the kids like to say. And the things it names the various treasures you find constantly have me smiling throughout the entire playtime. Other characters besides Olimar and Louis get dialogue of their own. The president and eventually Olimar's wife and kids and Louis' grandma send emails that flesh out our main duo's lives and the story at the end of each day. These are all full of flavor and add a lot to the game, allowing for a brief break from the ship's snark between days. If the first game's theme was nature, then Pikmin 2's theme would still be, well, it's still nature, but now the game looks way better. It's prettier is what I'm trying to say. All the environments are bigger and packed full of more little touches that make this world feel even more lush and full of atmosphere. Lots of plants like a diminishing dandelion. The lighting feels appropriately different in each region, and details like fog blocking out the camera whenever you're near a cave really make this one of the most immersive games Nintendo has ever produced. The world has also gotten a lot more diverse too. All the levels in the first Pikmin felt distinct, sure, but they were all just takes on a general forest theme, with the only arguable exception being the distant spring. Here we have 4 stages, each themed around one of the 4 seasons. The Valley of Repose is obviously the winter one, the Awakening Wood is for the springtime, the Perplexing Pool feels distinctly summery, and the Wistful Wild has subdued fall colors. These aesthetics are all just so beautiful, despite how dated the hardware makes them look. The game just radiates this warm, nostalgic energy that makes me want to live in these stages. Unfortunately, due to the characters being 1 inch tall canonically, I would probably squish all these locations by stepping on them. Plenty of new species and obstacles further bring the world to life. Pikmin 2 has the most creatures out of any of the Pikmin games. Sure, most of them are just recolors of Bulborbs, and plenty of favorites like Wollywogs and Snagrets and the beady Longlegs return, but lots of these creatures bring their own behaviors to the table, and I love all of them. One of my favorites is this shrimp thing that hides in a hole to dive out and grab at a potential meal. You can really get to know all these guys through the Piklopedia, where you can toss pick carrots at them to provoke them to attack, and that's just the best thing ever. I could spend hours looking at every single creature. There's also the treasure hoard, where you can look at the different treasures you've collected. As you've probably noticed, these treasures are all either based on regular household items or are straight up real world products. The Duracell battery, a bottle of chapstick, a Vlasic pickle jar cap, and even Nintendo's old Love Tester, which was a shitty toy they used to produce before they just made video games. All of these make an appearance. This confirms the planet to be a post-human Earth, which, despite the whimsical and beautiful nature of the world presented to us in the game, is very creepy and unsettling in a way. But looking at this stuff doesn't feel too stressful, mainly because the Piklopedia and the Horde share one of the most relaxing tracks in the series. I guess we're getting into the music now, so here's my Pikmin 2 mixtape. The soundtrack was composed mainly by the returning Hajime Wakai, but this time he got some minimal help from Nintendo veteran Kazumi Totaka. Even if you don't know Totaka's name, you know his work, as he worked on the original Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening and Luigi's Mansion prior to Pikmin 2, and would later be the main composer for a cult classic known as Wii Sports. I think the pair did an amazing job expanding on the musical stylings of Pikmin to make an even more amazing whole soundtrack. The main area themes are all fantastic if you ask me, from the Valley of Repose's ambient chimes that make you want to get nice and cozy, to the Awakening Woods cheery horn section, to the perplexing pools paradoxically relaxing in mysterious arpeggios, to the Wistful Wild's intense pan flute, which is a thing you can pull off apparently. All the core tunes are perfect as you strut around the planet's surface, battling and hunting for treasure. But you know what's even more impressive? The amount of variations has expanded. The last game had an added percussion track for when you were next to working Pikmin or fighting enemies. But now, Pikmin Working has its own section, the combat has its own instrumentation, and they added a feature where the captain's taking damage slowly increases the tempo. But they also added my favorite thing ever. When you're playing as Olimar, the songs are played in a standard 4/4 or 3/4 time signature, but when playing as Louie, the time signature is given more of a swingy feel in 6/8 or 9/8. It's not surprising that this score, being made in a pre-Mario Galaxy world, was scored mainly using synths and MIDI programs. I love MIDI scores, as most older games were produced with these means, so that's not a knock on the game at all, but it's doubly unsurprising the soundtrack was produced this way, because doing so allowed them to add all these crazy effects far more easily than if it was recorded live. If any of my subs like making music and you want to use some of the sounds you heard there, the Pikmin Wiki found that a lot of the samples can be traced back to the libraries of the Kurzweil K2500 and Roland SC88 synthesizers. I don't actually know how to pronounce those. I don't know if anybody's going to buy them, but I'm going to put the link to that Pikmin article down in the description. I mean, you could probably just look up a sound font too or something, but... Oh, I should probably discuss the cave music before we finish up. It's good in a very different kind of way, because for the most part, it's very amorphous and at times straight up atonal. There are lots of good memorable pieces associated with the caves though. Here's a few of my favorites. In addition to looking and sounding more impressive, the gameplay has seen a lot of helpful tweaks and structural changes that make this game feel a lot more realized. Pikmin 1 is one of my favorite games of all time, so despite all of its flaws and harshness, it was still more than functional in my opinion, but it did need some dewrinkling. Pikmin 2 makes plenty of efforts to do just that, so let's see all the improvements that have been added. For starters, lots of things were changed about the Pikmin themselves, and that's awesome. Last time, they were more ditzy than a country hick in a computer store. Lots of tripping, slow movement, and just a general lack of responsiveness. But they're way better this time around, often moving more quickly. I could be wrong, but it feels like they're more receptive to desperate whistlings, and newly planted ones even sprout way faster. This can be canonically attributed to Olimar having recently trained a bunch of them, and as a result, their general self-awareness being higher than previously, but as a gameplay improvement, it just feels so good to control a far more intelligent species. Leaf ones still lag behind and they still get snagged on corners, but improvements are improvements, and I'm grateful for the effort regardless. There are also 3 new types of Pikmin to take advantage of. I consider it 3 because one of them has been super changed from last time, or should I say supercharged? Should I say that? The yellow Pikmin can no longer carry bomb rocks, as those have been turned exclusively into dungeon obstacles, but they now focus on electricity immunity, making them feel like an entirely different type. They can knock down these electric fence walls and deal with electric enemies. That's a godsend, because for some reason, electricity insta-kills any Pikmin that touches it. Who thought that was a good idea? Who thought this was a good idea? The other types are interesting in their own ways, especially in how you get them. The purple Pikmin are your heavies in this game. You use them to daze enemies with a huge stomp, and they can do a lot of the lifting because they have the strength of 10 Pikmin in one body. That means you can also abuse them in combat by using their stomps to stun enemies while also doing crazy damage. White Pikmin are weaker than all the other types, but they do move more quickly, are immune to poison obstacles, and can poison enemies if eaten. And they can use their weird bug eyes to see treasures under the ground and dig them up. These 2 brand new types are great and bring some new type-specific tasks to the table. How they're produced is also of note, as they aren't grown from onions. You can only get them from caves by using special candy pop buds. These Pikmin changing flowers were totally optional in the first game if you knew what you were doing, but here they're the only way to get any purple or white Pikmin. That means if they get eaten, there's no easy way to get them back, so you have to be careful. I don't think that's the most player-friendly way to handle it, but it does feel like a plausible way for Pikmin to come into being. It's interesting, like I said. Oh, and how could I forget the player favorite Bulbmen? Look at them, they're so cute! You can recruit them by killing their more mature Bulbmen captains. They're kind of boring from a gameplay standpoint, as they just exist to give you some extra guys in the caves and are immune to all hazards, making them a get through easier card if you can keep them. They do add to this game's world building though, as they seem to be regular Bulborbs taken over by an unclassified parasitic type of Pikmin, which is a really cool idea. Overall, the new Pikmin types are valuable additions to the team, even if their methods of reproduction make it stressful to use them when they aren't absolutely necessary. Their designs are also fantastic, making them stick out from the original trio without feeling ridiculous or implausible. The idea of a captain standing in for a regular cursor has had a few additions made to it as well. The most notable is the addition of a second captain. Swapping between the 2 of them can sometimes allow you to accomplish multiple things at once, and I stress, sometimes. Captains can only do things while you're controlling them. They don't have any AI programming that will allow them to automatically do tasks. So while this feature is extremely helpful while you're waiting around for a wall to be broken down or Pikmin seeds to sprout, I usually found myself just sticking with one captain because I never knew if there was a puzzle that required both captains to be in the same place or not, right around the corner. There isn't even any co-op in the story mode that could kind of explain or somewhat alleviate alleviate these issues. At that point, there may as well have just been one captain like the first game. I do appreciate the effort to expand on the concept, as it was already a pretty interesting genre shift. Shifting the idea further is a worthwhile idea, but it needs to be more than just simply having a second character existing to truly evolve it. Sorry, Louis. A great modification to the captains is the post-cave power-ups. Treasures collected from bosses are modified into new items that upgrade Olimar and Louis' abilities. A longer range for your whistle, punching harder, taking less damage, becoming fire and electricity resistant. All of these types of expected improvements are here, and they really make getting through a cave exciting, wondering what regular old things will add to your arsenal. One of my favorite features in the original Pikmin was the day system, a timer over each day that limited how long you could explore an area, which added to the countdown to your doom, forcing you to always be strategizing and going for max efficiency. Now that being said, I can see why, after that game, it would seem more appealing to the developers and to players to remove a strict limit. The timer marking morning to night is still around, but there's no day limit hanging over you. When you go into a cave, time stops, so when you exit, it's still whatever time it was before you jumped inside. All of this allows you to focus more on becoming fully immersed in the world and the dungeon crawling. This therefore goes on to also accomplish making the game more easily longer, since you can take more time to hunt for more treasures. It also brings the moment-to-moment gameplay fully into the limelight, making the game more wholly accessible to new players or players who struggled with the first game's demanding premise. I really enjoy exploring these gorgeous areas, so I'm all good with the time limit being lifted. Yep, no, 100%, no facetiousness on this face right here. We're not coming back to this later. Don't put a pin in this. Another thing I really enjoy is the complete overhaul to challenge mode. This time the mode has its own dedicated stages, and there are a lot of them. They are based on the caves though, so I didn't really feel like playing through them all, but I liked the shorter lengths and the tighter pace. Wouldn't you know it, they added a timer, which makes this mode feel closer to traditional Pikmin. The shorter length also makes them a lot easier to replay for a better score, and it actively rewards you for doing better, which I really like. If I was super into the cave gameplay, I would probably love this mode, but regardless, it is better than the last game's challenge mode, so I guess by definition, I got what I wanted. Good job. I was going to talk about the 2-player battle mode, and I was really excited to record it too, because I was going to sit down with my friend Dave and battle it out. Unfortunately, I'm a total dork dweeb and left one of my nunchucks at home, so we couldn't even play the mode. I'm sure it's a ton of fun though, I'm just not in a position to have a good opinion about it. All of the changes I mentioned do a lot to improve a lot of the main gameplay, which makes just sitting down to casually enjoy a session of Pikmin 2 feel really enjoyable. Unlike Pikmin 1 though, which was short enough that any huge issues didn't ruin a whole playthrough because you were so close to the end, Pikmin 2 tries to add a lot of changes to make the game feel more worth full price, I guess. A playthrough of Pikmin 2 can run you anywhere from 12 to 20 hours, which is about twice as long as the longest possible Pikmin 1 playthrough at its shortest. So problems really start to feel like big problems. The kinds of issues where the more you have to put up with them, you just have to ask, why? Why is this like this? Why is this in here? For example, I mentioned the new Pikmin types in the addition of a second captain. Although I really like the new types, they have caveats. They can only be gotten in caves, which means if you aren't careful, you can lose them for long stretches of the game with no way to easily recover from your mistakes. Heck, the Bulbmen are only temporary, even though plenty of Bulborbs can thrive on the surface. Why are these guys limited to the caves? Why isn't there a purple and white onion? Or why aren't the candy pop buds on the surface to help you recover from screw-ups? Why isn't there some kind of gameplay balance that makes you able to take some Bulbmen out of the caves? The answers to those questions are intertwined with the world itself, so they aren't immersion breaking, but I often found myself wondering why you couldn't discover onions in the caves or something. And don't even get me started on the issues combat has in this game. With the purple Pikmin, if there's no elemental hazard on an enemy, that stomp will knock them out and pretty much auto-kill them. The new types raise more gameplay questions than answers. Same with the two captains mechanic. I just talked about the issues with it, but still, it's a great idea that leads to enormous flaws across the whole playthrough. But another thing that really gets under my epidermis about it is how they added a system that theoretically would allow you to be more efficient in a normal Pikmin game, but it's rendered as pointless as a sphere because of the absolutely beaten up day system. And they only really had to invent a second character as a result of this game's awful story. Yeah, welcome to the Angry Drew part of the video. Why does the story suck? Well, in addition to Olimar and Louie and the president getting shushed so the spaceship can be on screen as much as possible, I just don't like how it sets up a continuation. Olimar just worked so hard to escape a dangerous alien world so he could get back to Hokate and see his family again. And all of his effort gets rewarded in this game by having his newly rebuilt ship sold off for a little profit, and he doesn't even get the chance to reunite with his family before getting sent right back to the planet. I thought I was playing Pikmin 2, not Exploitative Capitalist Corporation Simulator 2004 Game of the Year Edition. The storytelling may be bad, but as a justification for the gameplay, it works out rather well at first. The game celebrates how much debt you've recovered over time. Every 10% milestone gets a big fanfare building up to the 10,000 Poco goal. It's really gratifying, it was a big motivator, but then the post-game gets going. Once you recover all the debt, Olimar takes off for Hokate with all the treasure, but he leaves Louie behind on accident. The credits humorously show Louie just kind of hanging out in his new environment, but after the credits, the president of Hokate Freight decides to go back with you to collect the rest of the treasure and try to maybe find Louie, probably for liability purposes, and this is where the game really gets going. Not only are there the treasures in each area to hunt for, along with any caves you haven't taken on in those areas, but there's also a whole new area unlocked, the Wistful Wild, which has its own treasures and 3 brand new caves. So there's arguably more to Pikmin 2 after the credits than there was before them. That sounds great at first, but it just becomes more and more of a slog. One of the biggest reasons for this is that it stops celebrating your progress. You're not getting treasure for any reason anymore. You're just wasting your time collecting it for no reason. And once I realized that, I really just had no reason to play anymore. Every second spent in the main game after the credits rolled was the longest and most agonizing part of my life, and that's saying a lot. It doesn't help that the day system and caves were wearing me thinner than I already am on their own. The day system is such an afterthought here, and it really only feels like it's still here because it was in the first game and because it aesthetically helped with the nature theme. With no day limit, that means that the number of days you spend on the planet doesn't matter, which means the amount of time you spend exploring doesn't need to have a limit on it. You don't need the time hanging over your head and interrupting you every 13 minutes or so, you just don't. But they kept it in anyway. Any efficiency-focused decision making, which was so important to the first game's success, is now also out the window. Having 2 captains does help make the game less boring sometimes, but it doesn't matter that it can help you do things more quickly when you don't need to do anything quickly. And picking the right team for the job hardly matters either, since it really only needs to be done as pre-cave prep. There's a couple ways I can see this being improved. One way that would be a huge expansion would be nighttime exploration, so you could still have your in-game days measured for some sort of purpose, but the game wouldn't need to interrupt you for no reason. Another way that you could implement a day limit system, but in a way that would feel less daunting, at least from my perspective, would be to have incremental limits for each chunk of debt. Like, for example, the game would give you 5 in-game days to achieve the first 10% of debt, then you would have another 5 days to reach 20%, and so on and so forth. If you wanted to make the game even less stressful, you could let any leftover days stack. Like if you got to 10% in 2 days, you could keep the remaining 3 days and get 5 more to reach 20%. Then maybe in the post game, to keep it from feeling exhausting, you have your remaining amount of days, which would probably be a lot, and you get 10 or 15 more to rescue Louie. Then there would be a concrete goal in sight, but your limit would be more lenient and therefore more accessible, like Nintendo was probably trying to achieve in the first place. But instead, we have a huge mechanic that doesn't work because they got rid of one crucial piece. I think the poor handling of the day system also ties into why I don't really have much to say about the level design. Like, I think all 4 of the areas look really great, and I think they're really well put together, but without features that encourage you to really get to know them and efficiently clear them, they just feel huge and slow to get through. Again, they have memorable parts and they're designed really well, but without the day limit and without actually useful dual captaining, they're just giant land masses that feel too big. But at least they're big and open. I can't really say that for the caves. That jingle is supposed to inspire curiosity, but it makes me shiver with dread. The caves are a concept that is unique to Pikmin 2. I know a lot of people really enjoy them, but the same reasons people like these things are probably the same reasons I hate them. Alright, okay, enough beating around the bush. Let's jump into it. So caves essentially introduce dungeon crawling into the game. That means a lot of the real-time strategy is done before diving into these things, as you can only bring whichever Pikmin you already have with you. You'll use each type to clear out elemental hazards and enemies, collecting a majority of the game's treasures, diving deeper and deeper before facing a boss at the end and rocketing back up to the surface. Time completely freezes in these areas, meaning you literally have all the time in the galaxy to complete the dungeons. This can be kind of fun when you're still getting used to it, but the longer the game goes on, it becomes more and more tedious. One of the main issues is that the caves are just too long. The number of floors is really demanding and should really have been dialed back. This is compounded by the sheer difficulty of these things. The devs were not on the player's side one bit making them. They'll drop you into floors with a bunch of tough enemies clustered all together. Rocks and bombs fall from the ceiling, which I guarantee you'll lose some soldiers to just because you can't see it coming. They made it super easy for your Pikmin to get chucked into a bottomless pit. All sorts of craziness. This is where the issues with combat come in. I think they ramped up the toughness to counteract the purple Pikmin, but also because they probably felt there needed to be some balance to the ultra spicy and ultra bitter sprays, which make your Pikmin stronger and turn foes into stone, respectively. So they tried to fix a huge problem by just slapping one band-aid on 3 disgusting wounds. And sure, it does save after every floor, so you can just reset as many times as you want, but that doesn't help when the caves are just so bland aesthetically. They all look distinct at first, but the more of them you explore, the more you realize there's only a few graphical templates: dirt caves, rusty pipes, a toy box, etc. There are some rooms that break the mold and look quite nice, but the main parts of the caves all look really samey. They did try to make it feel less so by randomizing enemy and treasure placements, which even affected me whenever I set up a retry for myself, but the differences were never big enough that I thought the randomized elements were worth including. It's a non-mechanic. Maybe they could be fixed by turning them each into shorter, more tightly designed, challenge mode-esque levels. I also think it would be interesting if some floors had these sort of temporary onions, which would help the caves be more forgiving and balanced, as well as adding more strategy as you carefully choose which Pikmin types to replenish. But regardless, I just don't enjoy the caves as they are now. They wear me the fuck out. I was going to try and suffer through the Dream Den, which is often considered to be where the story really concludes as you rescue Louie here. But once I got to the 4th floor, I really just couldn't take it anymore. And I was gonna reset and tank through it, but I realized that my hatred for all this stupid spelunking wasn't gonna vanish. I already know how I feel, and if I'm not having fun playing something, then it's a waste of my time. I think this is the most angry script I've ever had to write, but hopefully I didn't come across too angry. I really tried to front load this script with things I love about Pikmin 2, because it's just such a polished sequel in so many ways. How it feels to control the Pikmin and explore the areas has been massively improved, and a lot of the new mechanics introduced are cool to toy around with. The longer the game goes on though, they really start to become huge issues. Really, the moment-to-moment exploration starts out making the game more fun than its predecessor, but because of the structure making the game longer, harder, and having things that just don't need to be there, the game has more than enough time to wear out its welcome. This game was released only a couple years after the first Pikmin, which means development probably started not too long after that first game was released. So I think at the end of this whole journey, Pikmin 2 represents a project that was just a big misunderstanding. There wasn't any real way that the team could really know what made the original Pikmin so great and special, and in their attempts to make the game more massively appealing, they accidentally dropped the ball. They lost the spirit of Pikmin. That sounds so cheesy, but I really don't know how else to phrase it. There's a lot of things to admire here, there really are, but you have to wallow through a whole nasty swamp to see it all. You know what I miss? That little animation I was trying to use for music tracks. I should try doing something like that again. I really was bringing my A game to these videos in a couple of ways. That intro I actually edited together in a day or two, and even though it's rough around the edges, I still think it looks kind of cool in certain ways. This was also before I started making music, so I had my brother Daniel make the intro theme, and he did a really good job. He's living in freaking Nashville now, so I would think that would make his musical talent obvious. I also had my friend Dave, who makes music as internet personality, very clever, make this sick image for all the transitions. I evidently was having a good time involving some close friends, which is kind of a nice reminder for me to give myself. That whole dramatic ending about how I didn't really like the game is when I realized that doing retrospective video series things could be really hard to commit to, and then when I did the Zelda retrospective a few months later because I was having the worst summer of my whole life, that ended up being crushing on a video by video basis in a lot of ways. So I think at that point I realized I just don't want to commit to doing one series all at once. I'm not built like Some Call Me Johnny. Since then I've basically stuck to individual games in my more linear style, which we'll see in action soon. Alright, on to the next. Despite a quick development cycle giving us 2 Pikmin games within 2 years of each other, the third entry was just something that kept getting talked about. Like, Miyamoto kept saying it would be out super soon and even said it would come out for the Wii, but it didn't. And I think it's pretty accepted that the Pikmin series sells well, but not enough to be a super mega ultra smash hit, so it slipped off Nintendo's priority list, which is one of the many reasons they're a dumb company. Pikmin 3 was comparable to Breath of the Wild in that from about 2011 to 2013, it was the Big N's biggest project, but it took forever for it to be revealed and even longer for it to be released. The game would later be officially shown off as a Wii U title with a big graphical boost due to the new console's high-def specs. Since I don't own a Wii U, and probably never will, I had to hope that someday this game would get ported to the Switch. That hope was the main reason I held off on reviewing Pikmin 2 or even thinking about a series retrospective at all. But late last year, Pikmin 3 Deluxe was released on Switch, and I was so freaking excited. Heck, I don't even have a box to show off this time. I was so impatient I bought this game digitally. I finished the main campaign in like a day. Whoops. So I did a second playthrough on Ultra Spicy mode, and I got platinums in all the extra modes. Then I replayed the story mode 3 more times, and then I replayed the missions over and over. So long story short, this is my second most played game on my Switch after Breath of the Wild. So I guess you could say I kind of really like it. Let me dive into why in this Pikmin 3 Deluxe long form review. This game takes longer to get going than either of the other two games. In terms of structure, I wouldn't say the game really gets into that typical Pikmin flow, kind of, until you reach the distant tundra, which would typically be reached on day 3 or 4. However, I want to focus on how day 1 takes even more time than normal to complete due to this game's cinematic approach to introducing our characters. We even have a fully narrated opening this time, that's pretty cool.
At last, the explorer's 279,000 light-year voyage nears its end. But as they initiate the landing sequence,
as seen in the cutscene, our 3 characters fall to the Pikmin planet, now named PNF 404, which is a fun little internet reference, and get split up. First, we meet up with Captain Charlie in a snowy field. He soon meets a group of yellow Pikmin, a nice change of pace from first meeting some reds, and in a bout of fear he tries whistling at them and then tossing them to get them off his back before realizing they're friendly. After some more walking, Charlie gets attacked by some mysterious force off camera. Ooh, spooky. Then we switch perspectives to Alf, the ship's engineer, who has landed in a more tropical biome. Here he meets the red Pikmin, and through a bit of work, he learns how to target nearby objects, how to get Pikmin to work on something like building a bridge using these tiles. He learns how to grow more Pikmin using pellets and enemy corpses, which also teaches the player about some basic combat. And he learns how to get the Pikmin to charge. After this, Alf stumbles upon his ship, the SS Drake, with the help of the Copad, which serves as a map and has some other features that you can use if you want, but I never really do. I will say though, it also looks like a really cool idea for a video game controller. Like, I really hope somebody makes a thing like that someday. Sunset, Nightly Predators, The Onion Takes Off, etc, etc, Pikmin. Now who wants to guess what my main critique with this opening section is? Well, if you said, and I quote, "It's too flip-flopping long," then ding ding ding, you nailed it. I understand why that's the case though. The story is more ambitious, the controls work completely differently now, the Pikmin have new things they can do, and also, in case you forgot, this was the first Pikmin game in almost a decade. That means entirely new players, people who enjoyed the game as a kid who hadn't played in forever, and even new things for recent players to learn about. However, I've already been through this story like 4 times, so I think this all takes forever. And that's probably my fault for oversaturating myself, but still, there's gotta be a way that I can start a new file and get through the first day in a few minutes and get to the Pikmining I'm actually here for. Despite Olimar butting in pretty frequently in the first game's first day, the intro was pretty brisk. You could get through it in less than a normal Pikmin day's length if you sped up his text. The following 2 games have placed a lot of emphasis on narrative, which makes the tutorial days longer than they need to be. I think that to an extent makes Pikmin gameplay feel more confusing and daunting than it actually is. But you know what's even worse about how 3 handles it? I don't even consider the tutorial done at this point, because the second day has you exploring your first full area, experiencing real combat for the first time, collecting your first few fruits, learning about a new type of Pikmin, and learning about what you can do with multiple captains. Thankfully, the characters actually talk for themselves this time, and double thankfully, most of the dialogue and cutscenes are skippable. However, all of the fake playing that teaches you how to do stuff is not skippable, which is what really makes this feel like a slog every time I start over to see how long it takes me to get every fruit. So although I do really like the introduction for new players, the more I revisit this story mode, the less I like how it kicks off. I should probably just jump into how I feel about the story because it takes center stage, more so than either of the previous 2 games. As was established at the beginning, the planet Kopai is starving as a result of gluttony and apparently no thinking ahead. Since they only eat fruit, they send out little drones to find a planet that has any, which turns out to be the newly dubbed PNF 404. So Alf, Brittany the best girl, and Captain Charlie launch out, crash, and must meet back up. After day 2, the days play out like more typical Pikmin, but the story is really what the actual progression is built around. Every area has a signal coming from a boss arena that points towards your next objective. You can explore the area as much as you want, but until you go there, beat the boss, and collect whatever plot point device is there, you're not moving forward. This does really help streamline progression quite a bit, actually. You can spend a day or two grabbing all the fruit you can, and you'll find a new Pikmin type to start multiplying in each area, so you can do whatever you want. And when you decide you want to go fight the boss, you can go do that and move on. Assuming you're not having a totally miserable time and generally know what you're doing, you probably won't be in the same area for more than, say, 4, maybe 5 days tops. Let's go with 5, which would be about 65 minutes. I wish it was 4 more than that, but at any rate, you won't be spending more than just over an hour of your time in any given location on a casual playthrough. All of my playthroughs have averaged about 16 days, so there you go. Being able to return to earlier areas later also helps make the game a lot more replayable, as you have more flexibility in how long you want to play the game for. You can turn it on just to see the story, or you can use that streamlined progression and the relaxed day limit to encourage you to return to the previous areas before moving on. I actually dig that. All my playthroughs can be different lengths and still feel fulfilling. But the actual story itself is kind of lame, honestly. First, you have to sit through the long opening, and then you take a while to meet up with all 3 captains. Then you rescue Louie, you have to chase him down again after he steals your juice. You unlock the final area, you have to rescue Olimar from this blob that has a crush on him or something, and you get your spaceship's key back and book it home. It's all just a wild goose chase up until the end. And while I will admit, as a big Olimar fan, it was fun seeing his little notes hidden around the planet. It was good his spirit of curiosity is still so strong, and ultimately saving him at the end was pretty heartwarming to see. Louie really got under my skin with his stupid, selfish attitude throughout the whole thing. Him running off with all our juice was the most interesting part of the whole thing, but that's about it as far as standout moments besides the final area. The story is far more involved, which means a couple things. For one, there are way more interruptions. You can hardly do anything in this game without having to watch a phone call or getting a transmission from the SS Drake. I think the most disappointing thing, though, is how it's focused completely on the here and now of our heroes' plights. It's not focused on the end goal because that keeps changing, so it's always in the present. Alf, Brittany, and Charlie finally have some good interplay between them, like I really wanted in Pikmin 2, and they introduced floating text boxes that don't interrupt the flow of gameplay, which is awesome. But these characters aren't as endearing as Olimar was in the first game. There's hardly any development to any of them besides Brittany. It's interesting because they're essentially in an almost identical situation to Olimar from Pikmin 1, but they don't ever act as worried or sensitive as he did. They talk about how it'll be great when they're the heroes of their planet, but they don't miss anybody from their planet. It's like they're worried, but they're not as realistically portrayed as Olimar was. There's no outside characters to fill in the emotional gaps in this game either. The focus is just on our main trio, and they act more plucky and less concerned with their plight at any given time. Probably because they have more juice than they'll ever need to survive. Good lord, that is so much juice. I mean, I think the story's fine. It has some good moments, and it's a good follow-up to 2, as any attempt to make Olimar do something again would have been really boring as a main narrative focus. It was a really smart move to play into the 9-year wait to see Olimar again, even if the characterization and overall repetitive structure make it less than a masterpiece in my eyes. It gets better as it goes along though, if you ask me. After you rescue Louie the second time and can return to other areas to get the rest of the fruit, the game chills out on the cutscenes and reaches its true potential as the ultimate openish world Pikmin Zen experience. The ending being more ambitious is great too, because it closes this game out on a great bombastic note that still feels true to Pikmin's themes and tones. Being constantly on the run from this giant monster and eventually facing it down is so terrifying and reminds you how ecosystems can get demolished by a single creature in the wrong environment, but also that most animals are no match for opposable thumbs. The day system also plays into some of my overall dissatisfaction with this story mode. It's a good compromise between the first game's hard time limit and the second game's complete lack of one. The first game's main collectible was the ship parts. The second had treasure, and in this game you're collecting fruits. At the end of the day, these things are squeezed into canisters of juice, and at the end of every day, you drink one canister of juice. So essentially, you can create your own day limit by collecting more fruit per day. Unfortunately, even if you aren't trying, it's very easy to collect an excess of fruit, which means playing the long game isn't really needed. Louis stealing all your juice does kind of shake things up until you rescue him and get it all back. However, even if the limit on the number of playable days ends up being meaningless, it's okay in my book. The counter at the top of the screen has a triumphant revitalization, so efficiency is once again brought back to Pikmin, yes! The captain's new AI system and a lack of shitty time-freezing dungeon crawling really make you want to get moving during each day. It's interesting to me because in my first draft of the script, I was about to be like, this new take on the day system is a good concept, but the number of days makes it fall flat. Oh, get real. That's not true at all. I didn't like Pikmin 1 because you could only explore for 30 days, and I didn't not like Pikmin 2 because you could explore for as many days as you wanted. I hated Pikmin 2 because it gave you no reason to try and be efficient with a set of mechanics that work best under the 13-minute time. And I loved Pikmin 1 so much because that trigger to my head kept me moving. It's the same here. Well, the trigger might be moving further and further away, but it is still there, which makes this take on the day system stand tall along with its oldest brother. And can I just say that with the combination of this and the game's great new mechanics, that this recorded playthrough is me at my absolute Pikmin best? I hate gloating, but like, come on, all the fruits in 16 days? That's pretty good, right? Like, I totally force bent that trigger backwards. I do think it could be improved by some sort of harder limit though. So for Pikmin 4, which will probably, well, hopefully, well, I really want it to be out by the end of the decade, I will repropose my incremental day limit idea from the previous video. I think that's the only way for you to be truly pushed to play the long game with your strategy while also being lenient enough to take some pressure off for newer players. Although I really love all the areas on display in Pikmin 3, there isn't much to dig into about the level design here. It's the typical deal. Collectibles and enemies are all over the place, meaning you'll have to multitask by getting your dudes to tear down stuff, build stuff, or move whatever. Just way more of what we've already seen, but I do mean way more. The areas are all ginormous, sometimes being made of several smaller paths that all interconnect. So despite the fact that I don't have a lot to dive into with each of the individual stages, I can confidently say that they're really, really great, especially because they're not empty and padded out. They actually compensate for all the new moves at your disposal. It helps that this game still has an excellent control scheme, even if we aren't using a Wii remote this time. Although the Switch's Joy-Cons can be used to kind of emulate playing with a Wii remote and nunchuck, most people will choose to play with a Pro controller. That's my controller of choice, and I played 90% of my first playthrough with it, except for when I ran out of AA's, so I had to switch to the Joy-Cons because I was broke. I hate college. But I do love this new control scheme. They added gyro aim, so you'll still be able to have the precision of motion aiming, but with a more comfortable overall setup. The buttons are all closer together, making actions easier to perform overall. My main complaints from previously were the accidental jimmying of the pointer by mashing the throw button, as well as the easy to shift camera controls, which weren't all that necessary to begin with. These have been absolutely obliterated here. Missing throws won't be an issue anymore due to lock-on targeting, Once you click the ZR button, your pointer will stay stuck to an object or enemy, and you can run around and toss your Pikmin at it and still hit dead on. And the camera issues were fixed by taking them away from the D-pad and putting them on the right stick. I wish you could zoom out instead of just moving it horizontally, but hey, I'll take what I can get. And with the terrible drift I have, at least I don't have to worry about anything if it's just horizontal. The only issue this time is that tilting an entire controller to move the pointer isn't as precise as the Wii's pointer, and it gets off course easily, to the point where they have a dedicated reset button. Sometimes that even takes a few presses to keep it from drifting, so using the Switch's controls has its own pitfalls just like the Wii remote. But I wouldn't say that either are awful or that one is better than the other. It feels like both controllers were made for Pikmin, and none of the issues I've stated have ever been game breakers, just tiny kinks that I really like shaming. The captains are muscular and tactical powerhouses in this game, as this time they can toss each other up ledges and across gaps, which is used for lots of puzzle solving. It gets even better than that though, because when they're on their own, they can move independently, and you can even tell them to walk somewhere on their own using the Go Here command. That means you can have all three at entirely different spots on the map, all working on something, which is a brilliant change and a huge improvement on how pointless having two captains was in Pikmin 2. There are plenty of moments when you want to stay together in a group so you have somebody to toss. It all depends on the situation. The game makes you pay attention to what's needed for any exact moment, and you planning ahead is what makes this game so captivating. The only thing to really complain about is the interface for switching characters. When you hold Y, a little menu will show up giving you options that you select by moving the control stick in one of the four main directions. The up arrow is for using the returning ultra spicy spray on your Pikmin, the down arrow dismisses the group except for whichever color is currently selected, and the two side arrows switch to either of the available captains. This is fine as a setup, but because of the different combos of captains, who they'll switch to always changes. This has the potential to completely halt your progress, as you might accidentally switch to the wrong captain a couple of times while just trying to do something simple, and it is as exhausting as it sounds. But that's the only genuine complaint I have with the captain system in Pikmin 3, although honestly, it's hard to imagine more than 3 captains per game ever being introduced. RIP concept character D, you'll always have a place in our hearts. I was initially apprehensive about the swarm move getting knocked out the door this time around. It's been replaced with charging, and although it takes some getting used to, I like it a lot. You simply tap a button, and whichever Pikmin type you have selected will dash forth. It's fast, and the Pikmin even handle it well, as only the required amount for carrying something will actually grab onto it, so you'll still have more of that type to use for something else. It does make combat slightly less hands-on than before, as you can't lead the entire group. You can only send them into the fray and whistle them back. But I don't really care about Pikmin combat that much, so that's no downside to me. This time, all the Pikmin types feel far more balanced as far as the story mode is concerned. The purple Pikmin absolutely broke combat and nulled one of the red's uses, and the white Pikmin were better but were far more situational. But this time all the Pikmin types have been balanced and updated to pretty much perfection. The reds still have their fire resistance going for them, and they're stronger at normal fighting. The blues still take care of water covered areas, and they're better fighters this time around because they can swim up and get their foes, which is sick. The yellow Pikmin can go higher than usual and can once again deal with electrical walls. They can also use their bodies as a chain to conduct electricity in the game's underground areas. The two new types are far better at different things this time. The rock Pikmin seem like such a silly idea, but they're so fun to use in practice. They can be used to break crystals that are now all over the place. They're also perfect in combat as they can hit like a truck and can't get crushed. This may seem like it makes the other Pikmin, especially the reds, useless in combat, but the rock Pikmin don't have elemental weaknesses, and they can't stick to things and keep attacking. They bounce off and get weaker afterwards. So the reds still have their place on the battlefield. The winged Pikmin are the cutest in the series, and they obviously have wings. This means they can carry things over walls and pass over water, and they can reach things higher in the air and lift these special gates. This is balanced by them also being the weakest Pikmin type, so they aren't much good in combat. They're far better for handling most of the lifting. All of these uses are evenly made use of, making planning ahead even more useful. Of course, it also helps that a lot of the new tasks make the Pikmin as a whole more useful. Having them run back and forth with the bridge tiles and digging in the soft soil are great ways to assure you can do some good multitasking regardless of which Pikmin types you have with you. Not to mention every type can carry bomb rocks now, which is just so helpful. The AI of these little guys is far better this time around too. They never stop and do their own thing unprompted anymore, and they added a feature where if you whistle a group of working Pikmin, they'll stop and only come back if you whistle at them a second time, which prevents you from accidentally stopping any work. Pretty much the only thing they're still iffy on is returning to you from around walls and stuff, as they can get stuck on parts of the environment still. They should really focus on making an intelligent pathfinding tool for the next game. This time, the story mode has 3 difficulty settings: normal, hard, and ultra spicy. Okay, that's so fun. Normal should be called easy, as the days are 18 minutes long in this one. Hard has the regular 13-minute day, and the enemies get twice as strong. Ultra spicy mode cracks down on the player by limiting you to 60 Pikmin as opposed to 100, and making fruit give half the juice. In a word, this difficulty option sucks. It barely changes anything. Pikmin combat isn't hard as long as you're careful, and having less Pikmin barely affects how efficient you can be in snagging as much fruit as possible. The only meaningful addition is the reduction of fruit juice, but you can still beef up your juice stock. On my first ultra spicy playthrough, I collected every single fruit, and I still ended with like 30 days left to clear the formidable oak. The only way this selection means anything is if you suck butt. Unfortunately, this is only the beginning of the quote-unquote deluxe port being crappy in the adding new content department, but we'll get to that one in a bit. Despite the story mode being a little less enthralling and replayable than I'd hoped due to a too repetitive structure, the moment-to-moment gameplay was the most perfect the series has had yet. So it's great that Pikmin 3 Deluxe has 3 fully fleshed out extra modes to continue making full use of this excellent gameplay. These are where I ended up spending most of my time with the game, and I also find them to be the most replayable parts of the game for the most part. The main attraction here is Mission Mode, a set of timed challenges, each featuring original stages made just for the mode, well, except for the enemy battling ones, which reuse the main 5 areas for its remix stages. But we'll let that one slide. This mode is focused on single-player stages that will really shove your planning and multitasking beyond their limits. Each stage has a limited assortment of Pikmin and a strict time limit. You'll need to accomplish one of 3 objectives during this time limit: collecting all the treasure in a level, killing all the enemies, and doing a rematch against the story mode bosses with whatever Pikmin they give you. Collecting treasure is my favorite type of challenge by a long shot. These stages will have you splitting your captains up as much as possible and staring at the map for extended periods of time, but don't get boozled. The footage may look boring when I'm planning, but my brain is going a gazillion light years per millisecond trying to create a foolproof plan to drag everything back to base. Playing all the stages over and over and over and over in hopes of getting that elusive platinum medal is such a great challenge and represents the absolute peak of Pikmin's unique gameplay as far as I'm concerned. Beating the enemies was still fun in its own way, but I honestly didn't find it nearly as challenging. The goal isn't to get everything back to base, it's just to take out every creature in the stage. So while you can take time to harvest some corpses, you can also just blaze through and take everybody out. It didn't take me more than a couple tries to platinum rank any of these. Refighting the bosses was an absolute letdown. It doesn't rank you on how many Pikmin you lose, it only ranks you on time as far as I could tell. So since I was just tossing my Pikmin with the most reckless of abandons, I beat all of these in one try. I was in and out of this mode in half an hour. What a letdown. With the main 2 challenge categories though, I will say the best thing is the level design. The first 10 stages reuse themes from the story mode but have unique layouts that are interesting and believable as part of the Pikmin world. I love them all so much, and the subsequent remake stages are interesting as they have totally different treasure placements and even start you off in different spots. I found them genuinely challenging and fun to learn. The last 5 stages, which were DLC Pack 2 in the Wii U release, are where it really goes off the chain though, since they added themes outside of the normal natural feels. The Rust Yard and the Secret Cove are my favorites. Guys, check this one out, okay? The Secret Cove has the same layout as the Forest Navel from Pikmin 1. I am losing it! The best layout and theme is the Fortress of Festivity though. It's a huge Christmas themed stage that features a tree with a lacy slide and presents and toy themed borders. But there's also just huge and somehow not rotten food you get to walk around on. I like that the mini boss on the pizza burrows inside of it. That's so cute and also physically implausible, but mostly cute. The only one I really don't like is the Clockwork Chasm. It floats over a bottomless pit, which means the Pikmin are easier to kill than ever, but I don't know, it also just feels too video gamey to me. For the most part, all these level designs and themes are excellent though, and it's definitely a new Christmas tradition of mine to play through the Fortress of Festivity. While mission mode is the pinnacle of Pikmin single-player content, there's also a strictly multiplayer mode as well. Bingo Battle sees 2 players using their squads to fill out their individual bingo boards with things from the stage. It's easy to dick over your opponent by overpowering their squads and stealing stuff from them, or even getting your Pikmin to chase the other captain and keep them from playing. Me and my friend Dave actually played this quite a bit when the game first came out, and he summed it up quite nicely.
War is hell.
That it is. He isn't as much of a swag Pikmin master as yours truly, but obviously he's great to play with. If you ask me, this is by far one of the best multiplayer modes Nintendo has ever designed, so almost regardless of skill level, anybody can pick this up and have a fun little competition. It gets an A+ for addictive. Oh yeah, side stories exist, lol. As new content for the Switch port, a mode featuring Olimar and Louie's escapades after the story was added. It's split into a prologue part before Olimar's capture in the story mode, which reuses the Wii U version's secret video files as the cutscenes. And then there are several missions unlocked after you beat the story mode that serve as an epilogue where Olimar and Louie return to do some more work. And that's all these are, more missions. This feels like a bit of a disappointment. I do wish a new shorter story objective was created using a strict day limit, but there's no way implementing more smaller missions wasn't easier and more feasible to add in, so I won't get too upset. I do like the shorter little story bits because it is a respectful little sequel to Pikmin 2 in terms of continuing Olimar's story. Its unique objectives like carrying ship parts or reuniting with Louie after an argument endear us to these characters once more, and it even has some good fan service for fans of the first game. Arrangements of the final trial and title theme can be heard in some of these missions, which I really appreciate. And the ending with the Japanese vocals may feel out of place until you remember that both of the previous games were promoted using vocal songs, so it's cool that they added this into a re-release of 3. All these missions are super easy though. That's ultimately why this mode is as forgettable as it is. I beat almost all of these on my first try, even the penultimate one at the Formidable Oak, which was a stressful seeming boss rush until I beat the enemies senseless, while being senseless. The only one that gave me any trouble was the one where I had to clear a path to get a ship part to the goal. That one took a few tries to get through, and so I thought it was the best of the new levels. None of them were outright bad, but I just wish that they were all harder. Like, if they weren't gonna make an ambitious new story mode, at least give me a new challenge to keep me occupied for a good chunk of time. The side stories were a decent concept for an add-on, but like with the ultra spicy difficulty, it didn't actually add on that much to the game. Is it time? Can I gush about how pretty this game is? Look at it! It isn't as visually diverse as Pikmin 2, but who cares? Every texture, every creature, every object looks as realistic as possible, and it is beautiful. Sure, if you want to get nerdy with me, it only runs at 720p with 30 frames per second, and yeah, I wish it ran smoother too. Having this game at an even higher resolution and even smoother frame rate would probably help the world of Pikmin feel even more like the real world, which is what the series is all about. I have a feeling that the number of Pikmin on screen is what's keeping this game locked at those numbers. And while you are rushing around trying to be as efficient as possible, Pikmin isn't a game with fast-moving gameplay, so I'm okay with the frame rate. At least it's stable. I wish the resolution could have been bumped up for some better detailed textures on the environments though. When you're moving around, they look great, but some ground textures just look like JPEGs. All in all, I have to say Pikmin 3 is by far the glitchiest game in the series. The other games had moments with the Pikmin's AI being wacky or not functioning properly, but here it's low-key on another level. There's just a lot more extreme visual and technical problems here. Pikmin constantly jittering when they're in a crowd, the exiting a burrow animation looks so bad whenever they all clip through each other. For some reason, the Pikmin refusing to latch onto things and carry them is an issue in all three games, so that's just kind of a tradition at this point, but it's definitely the worst here for sure. This flickering light that irritates my eyes and probably also your eyes is in the Formidable Oak, which I can't really tell if that's how it's supposed to look or not, but I'm pretty sure it's a glitch. And the incredible and omnipotent floating nectar. This one was at least funny. I poked at it and tried to get it to do anything for most of that day, but it just wouldn't move. It ended up getting memorialized in a photo I took that showed up in the preview photos every time I went to land at Twilight River again. I love this so much. Yeah, I don't know why there's so many issues like this in a first-party Nintendo game though. But please do not get me wrong, Pikmin 3 is a very polished game. The Pikmin, the creatures in these ecosystems, and the fruit especially all look gorgeous even after 7 or 8 years. I mean, come on, look at these fruits and tell me they don't look tasty. I still like how the other games look, don't get me wrong, but the raw graphical prowess on display here makes this the best looking Pikmin game by a long shot. Pikmin 4 has a lot of competition. I hope I get to lay my eyes on it before I die. Pikmin 3's soundtrack finally gets to use live instruments, and it sounds incredible. The wacky and tranquil ambience from before gets to be even more serene thanks to the combined efforts of Hajime Wakai and series newcomers Asuka Hayazaki and Atsuko Asahi. Hayazaki had worked on New Super Mario Bros. And Mario Kart Wii, as well as Twilight Princess and Spirit Tracks. Asahi was a newcomer at the time, having only worked on Animal Crossing, New Leaf, and Steel Diver. I've never heard that music before. Dang, this is pretty good. This is all around a solid team, and they did a bang-up job with Pikmin 3. I love the music in every area of this game. It's really great. I also really enjoy the cave and rainy day music. It's all weird but inviting. If this soundtrack interests you, you should watch Scruffy's video on how the boss theme cycles through its variations. It's hard to show off in this video, but the variations all really add to the fights. As you can probably guess though, Mission Mode has my favorite songs. They're small and fun, fitting with the arcadey nature of the work you're doing. They even added some new tracks for the side story mode in the Switch version, which are swayers. As a transition into my conclusion, you know what else I really like? I love the credits music. Pikmin 3 Deluxe truly brings out the best of Pikmin in multiple areas. Its moment-to-moment gameplay is as polished and addictive as possible due to the additions of targeting, charging, and captain commanding. The graphics and music have the best production values in the series, and each of the extra modes add a substantial or at least intriguing content to the game. Some of the mission modes are better than others, but the actual challenge stages represent the best of the series overall. The story mode may be a disappointment in a number of ways, and the new content presented in the Switch port isn't anything to write home about, but between how great its highs are and the fact that it's on Nintendo's most accessible platform to date, plus, I forgot to mention this, but you can play through the story mode with a friend, which is great in its own way. I think this is the best shot at glory the Pikmin series has. It isn't as perfectly structured as Pikmin 1, maybe you don't like that it isn't as expansive as Pikmin 2, but despite its flaws, this is hands down the most recommendable Pikmin game. And if you've been watching my videos to gauge if you'd be into this strange plant slavery series, pick this game up as soon as you can. You can get the demo on the eShop and try it right now, and I guarantee with some time, you'll really come to understand why so many people love this game. Wait, no, this series. Since this is the end of the entire retrospective, I need to talk about where I think the series should go from here. With more powerful hardware inevitably on the horizon, I think this game could really show off a potential 4K console. Pikmin 3 is already eye-melting, so I want to see an even more immersive look for Pikmin 4. I think adding a colony of characters could add quite a bit of depth to the gameplay as well. You could recruit characters from the colony as temporary captains with new skills, and you could send extra Pikmin to the colony to help grow it even while you're away. Whenever Pikmin 4 comes out, as Miyamoto has said it's actually close to completion, like 5 years ago I think at this point, I will pick it up and play it. Obviously. It's one of my most hyped games of all time from one of my favorite Nintendo series, but I have to accept that it'll probably be a while. That's just something I've had to deal with over the years. With Pikmin 3 Deluxe turning out to be the best-selling entry across the whole trilogy, hopefully it's sooner than later, but I obviously don't have any control over that. In the meantime, I have 3 really great games that I will always make time for. I'll always return to Pikmin for Olimar's struggle to survive and to get faster every time. I'll revisit Pikmin 2 for its beautiful and immersive environments and world building, And I'll revisit Pikmin 3 for its incredible presentation, great quality of life changes, and cocaine-esque mission modes. This series and its natural aesthetic and addictive gameplay will keep me replaying it for years to come, and it's that love I have for it that made these videos a ton of fun to work on as well. I'm glad I get to give one of my favorite trilogies its due diligence. Thank you to everyone who joined me on this look back. Yeah, I think Pikmin 3 actually passed Breath of the Wild as my most played Switch game, and I've definitely played it more than Persona 5, so I really fucking love Pikmin 3. I also love how I predicted the colony aspect of 4, and that's it, everything else was wrong. Not much to add here, that was actually decent. My next video on the mobile phone game is interesting. I chucked it together because I was on Thanksgiving break and I needed something to do, and I knew the Pikmin videos did decently, so I wanted to capitalize on that. I got my fair share of Bloom the week before, because I went on a trip to Seattle, so I was blooming shit with my steps left and right. I think the thumbnail is really cool, but since I had never made a video based on a mobile game, I don't think the in-video presentation was all that great, except for the little jingle I made. I'm proud of myself for finally exploring music. Something I don't think that I've ever really talked about is that I was actually writing the video the week before I edited it, and since I was in Seattle, I wanted to do this live action bit where I was like walking around with my friends and kind of playing it and messing it around, and I was gonna like draw cartoon personas over all of our like actual faces to kind of keep us anonymous and like further my channel's branding a little bit, I guess. That just didn't end up happening for whatever reason. I remember feeling kind of annoyed, but I don't really think there was anything that deep behind it. I just think we didn't do it. That would have been a really fun segment to include that just didn't end up happening. So now we just got like a little phone review. So hey person watching this, I hope you're having a beautiful, lovely day, or as lovely as it can be in November. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that because this video is about a mobile game, I'm unable to reliably gather my own footage, unfortunately. There's a number of reasons why, but the main one is just that it's on my phone and it's tougher than a console-based game to get quality video from. Therefore, my footage has been guided from the following sources. They're there, they are on the screen, and I am giving them the proper credit that they deserve. Thank you for your time, and enjoy the video. So earlier this year, I did a long-form review retrospective on the Pikmin trilogy, a series of games that I really love due to their focus on a believable nature theme and addictive, efficiency-based real-time strategy gameplay. Those games mean so much to me, and obviously I'm beyond excited that a venture to further the Pikmin franchise now exists on smartphones of all places. Pikmin Bloom released on app stores a couple weeks ago, and I've been spending plenty of time with the game, so I wanted to do a formal review for it. As this is a mobile game, it's very possible lots of updates and new content could be arriving at unidentifiable points in the future, so I'm not comfortable calling this a long-form review because to me, despite my naming scheme revolving around video length, calling a video script that makes it feel like I need to make it definitive. By the time this could be definitive, I guarantee you nobody will have a flip to give about this game. So I'm gonna focus on this game at launch. I'm assuming that's okay with you, right? Okay, cool beans. Well, then I guess let's dive into this Pikmin Bloom short-ish form review. So over the last 5 years or so, Nintendo has been making a push to try and join the mobile market using unique takes on some of their more iconic IPs. The first and arguably most successful of these was Pokemon Go. Everybody was on that thing when it came out, despite a lack of abundant features. It was kind of a cool phenomenon. Everybody was out there catching Pokemon, they were getting hit by cars, they were buying Starbucks tie-in frappuccinos. It was a crazy time to be alive in 2016. I missed out on the whole frenzy. I'm not really a huge Pokemon fan regardless, but like, you know, I would have played this. The only thing holding me back was the fact that I only had a flip phone at the time. You can thank my parents for that one. Although some of the following Nintendo mobile releases definitely were hits in terms of downloads, Super Mario Run, Mario Kart Tour, and Animal Crossing Pocket Camp are all kind of reviled, I feel like. Like, of course everybody's gonna get Mario Kart and Animal Crossing on their phone phones, it's freaking Mario Kart and Animal Crossing, not on a $300 Nintendo box. Now it's on a $900 Apple box. But once people dove in, the shady practices of gacha and microtransactions reared their sickly little heads. It feels just as out of place to talk about now as it did when these games first released. Most phone games do have these things in them, but in a Nintendo release, it just felt so surreal at the time. On top of all that, I found the base gameplay of all these titles to be unenjoyable ripoffs of their console equivalents. Any further Nintendo apps probably won't catch my eye, I'll just skip them. However, to me, Pokemon Go is still the most unique out of all these games for the simple reason that it's built around AR. All the other apps were more self-contained games that were supposed to be a simplified version of the console game's formula, like a Mario Auto Runner, a Mario Kart game you control with your finger, and spending money on furniture. Pokemon Go got players to go to locations in search of in-game rewards, and I think that unique take on the gotta catch 'em all formula really makes the game more worth it than its more watered down contemporaries. And sure enough, Niantic, the company behind Pokemon Go, got to put a similar spin on the Pikmin series. Needless to say, I was super excited for it to come out. I remember when the news dropped of a Pikmin app's existence, and I actually signed up to be part of the beta. But did they ask me to be part of the beta? No. Whatever. The game's out now, and I've been on that grind. As of writing this script, I'm at about level 24 or so, and as of editing the video, I'm probably even further than that. So what's the freaking deal with the gameplay, yo? Pikmin Bloom is a walking companion app. It doesn't emphasize AR as much as Pokemon Go, but it uses elements of it in order to encourage you to go on walks. This is already a perfect sell to me because of how I go about exercising. I am a walking freak. I always make sure to go on at least one 30-minute little jaunt every day, so the idea of having little Pikmin minions to follow me around on my walks, like they do in their own series, is an adorable idea. Like with most Nintendo games, you can make a valid argument that walking is the main mechanic of Pikmin Bloom, and therefore everything is built around it. The main two supporting pillars there are growing the Pikmin and planting flowers. In your planter pack, you have these little slots that you can put seedlings in. There are 2 permanent ones, and then sometimes when you level up, you get a couple that you can use to grow a single seed before it disappears. All the major Pikmin types are represented in this game: red, yellow, blue, purple, white, winged, and rock, and they're unlocked in that order. The main trio takes 1,000 steps each to grow. Purple and white take 3,000 steps, and winged and rock take 5,000. You unlock all of these different types at various level caps, so these increases in steps kind of work in tandem with the game to give a sense of escalating effort per level. Anyways, steps are how you grow individual Pikmin, and when you've walked enough, you can pluck them and have them in reserve. You can even name them in this game, finally! I have different themes for all my colors. Reds get generic white dude names, yellows are named after yellow foods, blues are named after characters I really like, purples are named after synonyms for being chubby little babies, white Pikmin are named after cryptids, winged Pikmins are named after drugs, not because I do drugs, I don't, but because they're like high, so it's like a joke. And rock Pikmin are memes that I think are stupid, so really the possibilities are never ending there. Leveling up itself requires certain objectives, like planting enough seeds or getting enough petals, as well as reaching a certain number of steps. But growing the Pikmin gives you these little motivating milestones between reaching each level's larger requirements. I think this part of the gameplay loop works perfectly. Planting the flowers is something I find myself feeling a bit mixed on. It's also a more complicated feature, so let's get into the thick of it. Nectar is a Pikmin staple. It's what you use to mature your Pikmin from the slower, weaker leaf variant into the faster, stronger, full-fledged flowers. In this game, you can send your Pikmin on expeditions to go get fruits from places you visited, and once they go out and get the fruit, you can turn it into nectar, which you can then feed to the Pikmin to grow their head plants, just like in the main series. However, once they have flowers, you can actually pluck the petals in this game, which is what you use to plant flowers around the world. All your different colors of petals, and there are surprisingly a lot of them, can be seen in this little menu. When you look at them, they'll tell you how many petals you've collected and how much real world time that will correlate to. Now, I think the idea is that you pick your color and you use that as a general guide for how long you can go on a walk for. If that's the case, I don't think it's that effective. You get so much nectar and so many petals that the only reason to pick flower planting for walking is to get rid of your excess petals. Other in-game motivations for planting these things are seeing your friends' flowers on the map as well, which is cute. You can also plant flowers around landmarks to turn them into huge flowers and get some rewards. What sorts of rewards? Well, I'm glad you asked. You get fruit. Yeah, walking and planting flowers doesn't seem to be the best thought out feature, unfortunately. Really, growing the Pikmin and sending the Pikmin out on little expeditions are the best parts of the game. The expeditions are literally just a menu and there's not a whole lot interactive to do, but it's just a cute way to interact with the app while you're not going out and walking. These expeditions are definitely the closest this game gets to matching the micromanagement heavy gameplay of the console games, and even though it's technically canonically wrong because the purple Pikmin are only worth 5 Pikmin instead of 10, it's cute. You can even get postcards from different locations the Pikmin visit, which you can then send to your friends. Me and my friends have been doing that constantly. It rules. Pretty much everything else, like planting the flowers and the fairly useless mushroom challenges that I really don't even want to bother talking about, are pretty superfluous. At launch, and this video should only be coming out a few weeks or a month after that point, there's a severe lack of content to keep people consistently engaging with this app, I find. Although Pokemon Go has had a substantial decrease in consistent users, it has at least added a ton of content like whole post-Gen 1 groups of Pokemon, but the thing about Pikmin is, what can they add? Well, actually, if it were all up to me, I would change a couple of in-place features. First of all, make growing the big flowers reward the player with costumes. That's a way better reward than fruit. I get enough fruit in my day-to-day life, if you know what I mean. Oh, I'm actually proud of that one. That sucks. Also, get rid of the mushrooms. They're stupid. What if instead, the challenges are various creatures from the games? So in a similar way to Pokemon Go, creatures like Bulborbs and Wollywogs can be found around your area. You could have a whole little Piclopedia to fill out. That would be a fantastic motivator to come back to this app and continue growing Pikmin for the bigger expeditions and crazier creatures. You could even have your steps motivate the Pikmin in battle or something stupid so you could be more involved with these bigger expeditions. I mean, that's what I would do. Okay, so let's take a beat and talk about monetization. As I said earlier, monetization in most other Nintendo apps has been pretty awful and very overtly predatory. Super Mario Run users can testify that playing past the first world requires a credit card swipe, Animal Crossing has tons of in-app purchases for most items, and Mario Kart has gacha mechanics. Ew, I hate that. Fortunately, Pikmin Bloom, at least at launch, only has in-app purchases for things that don't really matter. If you really want some more nectar or a seed growing thing or whatever, you can buy them, and that doesn't bother me. I don't really care. What is annoying about it is how if you really want to use the shop, you're going to have a hard time doing so using anything but your credit card. The only currency in the game is these flower coins. The main way that you earn them is by planting flowers, which would seem to give doing that a more practical use. However, the rate at which you earn coins is wickedly pitiful. It feels like this is the devs' surefire way to get you to spend real money on Pikmin Bloom. That is pretty annoying. At the very least, though, I can say that no substantial content in the game has been locked behind monetization yet. Now, if they do change that, I'm gonna be pissed, and I'm gonna make like 55 rant videos, and I'm gonna put Mario Odyssey gameplay behind them while I talk about how heinous Nintendo is. And then I'm gonna put footage of me getting onto the Nintendo eShop and spending $60 on every single video game they've ever made. So don't change the money system in Pikmin, Nintendo, or I swear I'll pay. This type of monetization does tell us a few positive things, though. It shows that Nintendo has learned its lesson about what people will complain about, at least, and it shows that they really wanted this to be as pleasant of a walking companion as possible, with as few annoying hitches as possible. This makes me think of Pikmin Bloom as being a little bit more of an experimental passion project to the company. That's 100% in line with Pikmin as a franchise, so in a way, it's kind of cute that this phone game does indeed fit in with the rest of the family in that way. The graphics in this game are pretty minimalist. It is a phone game, so it's not like it runs well on anything that's not a current gen iPhone, but still, the graphics aren't unappealing, but they're definitely minimalist to a somewhat underwhelming degree. The Pikmin are definitely the thing you'll be seeing the most, and they look like slightly less darkened versions of their Pikmin 1 representations to me. They have this weird texturing that I don't gel with personally. That's all I have to say about the graphics. I also don't have a lot to say about the music because it also takes a very minimalist approach. It's pleasant, but it's all pretty much just ambient versions of the main Pikmin theme, something you could argue is already more than a bit overused in the main games. That being said, one song I can for sure recommend as a pompous VGM connoisseur is the Planting Flowers song. The gameplay mode may be kinda useless, but the track that accompanies it is a pretty perfect piece of musical score. Its tempo is at a decent walking pace, the instrumentation is nice and pleasant, and it's got some decently emotional hooks. As an app made to encourage you to walk and gathering little Pikmin buddies to join you, this game is a mixed bag, but I'd say it's still a success. Growing the Pikmin using your steps and micromanaging them via expeditions is fun and satisfying. Even the flower planting, which is pretty shallow and ultimately not that rewarding, is still a cute idea that does try to encourage you to get out and move. I think more than anything, it's a missed opportunity that they didn't launch this game during the summertime. With how brutal winter is in most places in the world, that's gonna kill excitement and users for this app more quickly than Nintendo probably wants. But I can tell you that I'll be a dedicated casual user of this app for as long as I can be, especially once springtime hits. If you like going outside and moving, or you want to do it more but need some motivation, I would actually recommend giving this a try. Hopefully they do add some more content to the game, like a Piklopedia mission or whatever else, but as is, it's a cute, helpful idea for a phone game. Give it a go. And I sure did milk it for several more months until I got absolutely exhausted of playing it, and then they didn't add any features, so I completely dropped it. Anyways, the time flew by, and the hourglass and the sand and the Days of Our Lives reference was edited on screen. Now we're here at my recent Pikmin 4 video after several years off from talking about Pikmin. So everything looks drastically different compared to those last few videos, and sounds different, and just completely feels different, I think. So I hope you enjoy it.
The more it stays the same, the more that it will change. The more it stays the same, the more that it will change. Never fading.
I'm not wasting anyone's time. Y'all already know the exponential degree to which I love Pikmin. It's embarrassingly obvious. I talked about the phone game. I figured that's where my retrospective would end because we were in that content drought. Yeah, there were the shorts, the 3DS puzzle platformer, the port of 3, and cameos at Nintendo Land, so Pikmin has been around. But come on. Miyamoto said 4 was basically done in 2015 and it was nowhere to be consumed. I call that a Mia moment. Dude, he was even an accidental dickhead in the September 2022 Direct as he came on wearing a Pikmin t-shirt just to be like, look everybody, Pikmin on your iPad is called Pikmin Bloom. Isn't that epic winning?
I also made a new t-shirt.
I almost had a befuddled aneurysm. But then he said, check this out. And after 8 years, Pikmin 4 did indeed exist, coming in 2023. Miyamoto also explained that the game was based around this concept of Dandori, which is basically just Japanese for planning out and executing a strategy, and that the controls and camera angle would be different this time. It seemed like Pikmin was copycatting its sister series to be bigger and more feature-packed than ever before. I had some apprehensions about the huge shifts being made here, but this is one of my favorite franchises of all time. As long as this wasn't straight up doo-doo, I'd love it because this entire collection is majorly goated, with the sauce no less. This game has so much stuff in it that I walked away feeling a tad bit mixed. We'll explore as we discuss the game, of course, but I'll have to look backwards and compare and contrast and blah 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 blah. If you're just looking for an actual review, Pikmin 4 is a fantastic game in the series, a great output from Nintendo in a year that was full of great output, and yes, you can use it as a great entry point due to lower starting difficulty and insane streamlining. But for all the people who know what's in this game, here's how it's unfortunately placed on my tier list. Yep, I was surprised too. But this is a long ass video for the fans, so hope you like listening to me, cause this game was 10 years in the making, okay? I get to milk this. Man, this title screen's beautiful. Each of these games have only gotten better looking as time goes on. Even just panning over new environments makes you stop and stare for a sec. Nintendo using Unreal Engine paid off. I do miss Pikmin 1 and 2 having a bunch of guys use their flowers to form the title, but the logo's different now, so I'll deal with it. When Bloom came out, they changed the series logo to this solid beveled text with a flower in the middle of the P, and all the other games now reflect this on their Switch home screen icons. Even Pikmin 3, which means now the first 3 games have title screens that don't match their new icons, and furthermore, if you own Pikmin 3 Deluxe physically, the box and cartridge have a different logo than the home screen too. Hilarious. The new Pikmin logo isn't even bad, just different and more Apple-esque. It's like they were trying to figure out why this game isn't selling as much as Super Mario, and they're thinking that the logo is the problem. Things kick off with this sick, stylized cutscene explaining that Olimar crashed and used Pikmin and this new dog creature to rebuild the spaceship. Now, let's note it's saying he's discovered Pikmin, like he's never met them before. We'll save the game theories for later, because Olimar's almost good to escape. He just needs a few more parts, and they lie in this new area, which is obviously a human house to us. The series has made it clear that we're seeing a post-apocalyptic Mars from the perspective of ant-sized creatures, but having a straight-up house is a bold step forward. We have a tutorial about whistling and riding the dog around, and just because you'll be doing these things a lot, I feel like they should have been individual tutorials in more relevant areas to get the player a better understanding more quickly. All this truly offers is narrative significance, and if you look at my script, that phrase is in quotes because this game's plot doesn't really go anywhere. It teases stuff that comes back later, but not anything in the main plot. For as arbitrary as 3's narrative was, at least it told a straightforward story that began at the start, instead of this weird mystery building shit where nothing fits together by the end and nobody cares. After sending an SOS, the Rescue Corps came to save Olimar, but their ship also crashed because this is Pikmin. That's how this works. Now it's up to you to save the day. For the first time in the console games, you make an avatar. I didn't like this at first because there aren't as many options as something like Miitopia or Sonic Forces or whatever, but I realized that this is the game furthering its more inclusive character design, which I appreciate, of course. I was able to more or less recreate my avatar which is, wait, I mean, not my avatar, I recreated myself. This is me. I'm a real cartoon person, damn it. A nice touch is that the color you choose affects the color of everybody else's uniforms, which is really neat. Oh, that string section hits. Nice. Now that we've touched down on PNF 404, let's start chipping away at the horrifying day 1. Any big Pikmin fan expects and dreads how hands-on these are. Pikmin 1's tutorial is a little annoying, but the least offensive, honestly. 2 and 3 way overstep their bounds and stretch the tutorial over 2 in-game days. 2 has an excuse because they need to introduce the caves, but 3 was just super annoying about it. This first day is so fucking long. Following a linear path, we meet up with the doggy, Ochi, who fucking kills me every time I see him in the profile picture. Like what is this pose? It's like... It's so good! We also save Colin and Commander Shepard by making Ochi pull, attack, and dig. The problem is that when you rescue Colin, he talks for forever. When you rescue the captain, she talks for forever. And when you discover the damaged ship, we have to evaluate the damage for forever.
You need to shut the fuck up!
It's just a travesty of a time. I remember I complained about 2's ship being too chatty, but I'm starting to miss its sass. These guys are too nice. This conversation lasts like 3 minutes, but I can tell you what the deal is in a sentence. We need to collect treasure to extract sparklium, a plot detail returning from the 3DS game, to fix the ship. It gets spread out because they take the time to explain how the treasure gets squished up by light particle beams or whatever. Dude, it's a cartoony visual cue. Who cares? Obviously, we discover a red onion here, start growing our army, and use Pikmin and Ochi in tandem to fix the ship. But that part of the tutorial starts 35 minutes into my 45-minute recording, and it lasts for less than 10 minutes. The other stuff around this lasts a good 10 minutes on its own, meaning that babbling drags the pacing, so you barely get to use Pikmin at all the first day. Blah. I don't mind dialogue being in this game. I actually like a lot of the characters. After sunset, they have lots of fun interactions, but I like it during the downtime, not when it makes the most brain mushing part of the game even more brain mushing. My head feels like banana bread goo after this. I want to give serious credit to the music used throughout this opening though. Like Pikmin 2, jingles with later or returning leitmotifs are sprinkled across the whole sequence. It's probably as close as a game can get to Looney Tunes. It feels like a well done cinematic score. Here's what stood out to me. Even the end of day theme sounds more minimalist compared to later days. Nintendo's been on their A game with matching their game's audio to the visuals during the Switch generation. This game is off to a fantastic start there, and obviously this whole opening shows that this game is carrying the Pikmin tradition of being incredibly detailed and gorgeous for the hardware. So I'm excited to get the tutorials over with so I can keep listening to and seeing something new and delightful at a brisker pace. I love this jingle and little animation that starts each day. Ochi coming to greet you is a really cute way to kick things off, even though I skip it later on. If I wasn't playing for a video, I'd probably skip the team meetings too. I get that in universe, any rescue teammates need a rendezvous to do their job, but they're still not really necessary when I could just go to whatever area I want to explore. The first is the Sun-Speckled Terrace, which is a typical Pikmin area, soil with some grass on the outskirts, but it stands out with the benches and gardening tools as scenery, which are shown off well by this intro cutscene. It gives a great sense of scale. I'm real excited to scamper around this place. Ugh, you motherfucker. Am I going crazy? Because I'm starting to feel like I'm stuck in a Little Dicky video.
And we're shooting a music video all about how we can make the most epic rap video ever for no money. Shooting a music video where the premise is how can I make the most epic rap video ever without spending any...
What does this have to do with saving money, though? You know what, a full verse would have been too expensive anyways.
They were Jewish too.
Jesus Christ. And speaking of that, Colin looks like he'd help teach Sunday school because he's got nothing else going on. Ugh, now that we're off the phone with Steve Martin, we can actually get to figuring out this game's flow. They lock us into a one-way path at the start, prodding us to grow more Pikmin and kill some creatures while also encountering these raw materials, getting Ochi to sniff out castaways, and tearing down a wall. You'll also bump into a cave that you're heavily encouraged to do before things truly open up, and you can swap bases and do all this at your own pace. I know that was a lot, and we're gonna get to all of it. Take a deep breath before your eyes glaze over. So we already know what to do with Pikmin. Toss them to have them get to work. They're more efficient and locked in this game than ever before. So when you see any task, just try to have them do it. Using creatures to get more soldiers as well as moving piles and tearing down walls are old hat for this series. I'm not explaining that. Ochi is swag, but he deserves his own spotlight because he's so complex. And caves are prevalent throughout the whole game, so they also deserve their own topic, other than in this first area because they serve as tutorials for things, so I guess let's start there. The new look for caves rubs me the wrong way. They look like a Play-Doh waffle iron in 3 distinct colors and stick out like a sore thumb in the environment. They wanted the cool flapping animation with different caps representing the various activities, but they should have stuck with the Pikmin 2 design, which was more natural. Differentiating caves by color for the Dandori stuff doesn't matter anyway because characters are standing by the cave whenever you find one. Oh, yeah, Dandori. Yeah, characters won't shut up about it in this game, and I'm not just talking about Billy Graham. They're all obsessed with planning and multitasking, like the guy that was like sleeping all the time. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Days are 6 hours. I get 21 days a week.
Okay.
You stack that up over a year, I'm gonna kick your butt in business in life. You stack that up over a decade, I get a bigger, longer life than you.
Wow.
Because I get time and technology. It's not the same as it was in 1903. It's different now.
Anyways, to finish up cave aesthetic stuff, cave aesthetics? I don't mind the flaps underground. They fit with the more industrial, bizarro scenery. And I don't mind the air vent being your return to the surface for the same reason. In fact, the Pikmin spinning in this cute, pleasing pattern as you ascend is one of the best animations in this game. And if they used a geyser like they did in 2, I don't really think that we could achieve the same thing. Each of these early caves are tutorials on new Pikmin types quirks or something about partnering with Ochi. They explain Red's fire immunity, Yellow's high toss, and the new Ice Pikmin's freezing powers back to back to back, and they force you to either ditch Ochi to find a different path or start a cave with both of you separated to make you switch between the 2 playable characters. None of them are all that tough or fun or interesting, but we've been given a variety of Pikmin. I got all 3 types on day 2, and they're covering all the bases of how to make Ochi helpful. The game got to all of this quickly, but also in ways where we were able to figure it all out at our own pace. The other big thing here is that, like I said, you can swap between multiple base points. Anytime you find these pink stones, you can have the onion ship and any Pikmin standing under them warp over to you. And doing this expands on the previous formula in such an incredible way. Now, every area becomes larger very naturally. It also challenges you to choose the best center of operations before you fan out and have a bunch of Pikmin going back and forth. The areas are huge, not just in surface area, but in verticality as well. They're all so tall. This gets accentuated by by the new camera angle being on our level. Before, the camera hovered up in the air and tilted at a downwards angle, which was important for gameplay, but also demonstrated how tiny the Pikmin were. Like the camera is you looking down at a bunch of bugs scurrying around. By pulling the camera closer in, you get a truer sense of the world's giganticness, and you get to see all the beautiful Unreal Engine textures more up close. The Pikmin world looks better than ever, and the environments having things to scale makes them more exciting than ever before too. We're not in fucking Bugs Life graphics anymore, okay? We caught up to Toy Story 3, guys, which is perfect because those collectibles aren't gonna carry themselves. Treasures are the main get, but there's those dang raw materials popping out of literally everything, as well as more onions and the new Flarlicks. The Flarlicks. You gotta get the Flarlicks, you guys. They're out there, you guys. We're sticking with Pikmin 3's concept of new onions merging and letting you get all your Pikmin out at once. So it makes sense that you'd have to stumble onto onions and take them home, especially because you can get wild Pikmin of all types before you find their onions. That's a great way to turn a staple into a collectible. I like the new design as well, keeping the wiggly legs of threes but having a more fleshy look like fruit. One of the series' biggest staples seeing a massive shakeup is the size of your army. In the original trilogy, you were limited to 100 at a time, but that's more than enough to get a bunch of shit done. In 4, this has been heavily restricted to 20 at the start, and you can only have 3 types on you now. It's like the classic film Galaxy Quest where there's a ship full of people, but only the 7 Tim Allens on the bridge actually accomplish anything. That's the only problem I have with that movie, and this is also the only relevant piece of media that I have to reference in this way. You can't bypass that 3 types barrier, but you can get a larger team by bringing the Flarlick thingies back to base, increasing your max Pikmin by 10. If you explore every area thoroughly like me, by the time the credits roll around, we've got the typical 100 as a reward. Having a bigger variety of collectibles than ever before is really only to this game's benefit. Even the main story collectibles aren't just treasures again, because it turns out we need to rescue castaways from caves and Dandori as well. So you get the fun of meeting new people all the time, and the variety plus nostalgia of the treasures. We haven't really focused on what makes the Sun-Speckled Terrace special at all, have we? While the gardening aesthetic is neato, it has a little tile pool and this place that reminds me of those layered vertical flower beds. It's all very grandma core to me. Also, that tile pool has the path to a blue onion. You could get it easily if you came back with some more abilities, but I'm not leaving till this place is 100%ed. I really don't care. So I used a really convoluted combo of ice Pikmin, yellows, and Ochi to get the blue onion and start building that population a little early. It's a perfectly fine first area. It's better on a first playthrough with all the new things to get used to, as well as things back at base, but on repeat playthroughs it's still fun to explore. The worst part is the music, which is more minimalist than ever. Like, that's hardly even a tune. I can't hum that. Not that it's anything offensive though. So after 6 days, some of which were early ends because Ochi couldn't swim yet, I did 100% of the things to do in this area. Yet another shakeup to Pikmin 4 is the hub area around the spaceship. Before, you just picked from nodes on a map between each day. Pikmin 3 made an aesthetic nudge towards a hub where characters would stand and discuss the plot before we headed to the map, but this time you get to waddle around an enclosure before heading to your daily destination. You can grind a couple of pellets here, but the real point is to talk. Since you're saving castaways, they all end up hanging out here. They all have different one-note quirks and give you a quest relating to it. You won't be going way out of your way to complete most of these. A teacher will ask you to rescue their students, guys will ask you to find new creatures or a bunch of treasure, you get rewarded for new onions, and there's looping quests for growing Pikmin and giving them flowers. All of these shower you with raw materials, so they're worth doing, especially as you 100% maps, which is also a side quest you can do. Exploring and making any nubbin of progress feels multi-purposed. By the ship are the rescue Corps fellas. Richard Nixon and Elvis's love child tile pulls up the map for you, but the real meaty pockets are Russ and Commander Shepard. Russ lets you spend raw materials to buy upgrades and low items. These are optional but very OP things like you and Ochi taking way less damage or being immune to hazards, but some previous abilities have become purchasable to incentivize you to spend. The Pikmin charge, faster running speed, and huge radius whistle come to mind. You can also spend raw materials to get things like bomb rocks or health recovery. Other than hurting for bomb rocks in an upcoming area, I very rarely found the items useful. The option being there to allow any playstyle is fine, so this isn't a bad inclusion, I just didn't need these things. I'm too good at this game, you guys. Shepard focuses on upgrades for Ochi, upgrading speed, damage, carrying strength. Upgrade that one as soon as possible so you can have Ochi just carry heavy stuff with no help. When you make rescues, Ochi's pop drive goes up. I think it's supposed to just mean his rescue dog's dopamine receptors got triggered, but like that sounds like a physical thing, like every other Nintendo collectible. This is the most abstract video game collectible of all time. Much like the player upgrades, this opens up great strategic possibilities, but can also turn Ochi into a goddamn powerhouse by the end of the game. That's why I like this upgrade system so much. It incentivizes you to keep adding to your arsenal as you go deeper. You'll constantly be making exploration easier, but I think the real intention was to make you continually more efficient. So by the end, really the only limits are the sunsets and your own ability to multitask. Speaking of sunsets, they're still here, but like in Pikmin 2, there's no limit to the number of days. In that game, I always find the sunset hitting totally pointless. In 1, and to a lesser extent 3, each sunset made a dent in how much time you have left to explore. So if any game should have had a seamless day-night cycle, it should have been 2. Nintendo were cowards for not adding that. But now, the day timer is given a totally new context, because the hub allows you to take your time to start quests and spend currency for any upgrades you think might be useful, and then once you leave, you can't get buffer until the next time you're at the base. So it gives you a reason to mull things over and lock in your decisions and do some mental macro management while you use your new stuff to do a burst of micromanagement. I also love the OP upgrades as well, because until you decide to buy them, you don't have them for any days before that point. You're weak until you're strong. You're not just pulling up the menu and adding to your skill tree at 3 p.m. It gives everyone this feeling of being literally scrappy. That's another thing about this hub, the opportunity for community. Pikmin has had very few main characters, although they're pretty good across the board. Olimar made a great impression in 1, the President made some sort of mark in 2, Louis flabbergasts me to this day. 3's MCs had cute banter, nothing amazing, but they're definitely a fine cast. However, these characters are all very similarly racially coded. Pikmin 4 has people with all kinds of skin tones and builds. Add their quirky characteristics and you have a great set of characters. Even if they're not super fleshed out, it's just so cool to keep seeing new faces, and I have to give the creators credit for creating a game where you meet people from all over space and they're welcomed into this Lost-esque group. I also want to thank the devs for Pikmin 4's astounding amount of androgynous twinks that rival even the best Zelda and Kingdom Hearts games. They're really out here doing the Lord's work. At this point, we've done some caves and rescued people. The main ones are our scientist Russ, who does the upgrades, and Dingo, who talks a big talk but is actually really lazy. Although he does express guilt because the team member stuck with him got snatched by some hairy thing with a leaf on its head. Once we get to some Dandori caves, we see these leaflings up close. They're mostly aloof, just wanting to see our Dandori game and fainting when we one-shot clear a stage. But one of them, who could really be anybody, tosses a guy into an onion and transforms them. So this is clearly building off of the bad ending to Pikmin 1, which is really cool because that was considered completely irrelevant until now. But after we beat this red leafling in a multiplayer match, we can save one of the leaflingified castaways while they escape to see another day. Now that we have enough treasure sparklium as well, we can head to another area. We have to do that because these leafling people are freaking comatose after you beat them, and we can't help them until we rescue the core's resident doctor. So hopefully we will find him soon. The team's ultimate goal is still to find Olimar, but we're also gonna help any castaway and try to save the leaflings, which is fine by me. Let's head out. The blossoming Arcadia has more garden vibes. Fitting its namesake, its paths blossom out from the first base. More places at higher elevations that you have to reach, a body of water segmenting the level, this beach-like area, a sprinkler, colorful picket fences, and in the background there's these tires that are so eye-catching. Vibrant colors in this stage, especially on the ground, because there's cherry blossoms everywhere, and the music is ethereal. The melody is still lacking, but it has more going on than just some kid banging out chopsticks in a public space, so it sets the tone nicely. And the vibes match the quality. They did a good job making you spread out to discover shortcuts back to base by using more bridges, routes, and walls, as well as climbing to split things up. Having all the baby stuff out of the way after the first area, this is where the game hits its stride by constantly making you drain and replenish resources. More bridges means you need hundreds of raw materials. I didn't actually count, so please just don't trust me on that. And constantly having a more limited squad moving all over the place to collect more backup soldiers, materials, items, and destroying walls. Almost like you're playing Pikmin and I'm a shitty writer. This area ramps up the complexity to a comfortable level, and I appreciate that as a veteran. There's some things that bog the whole game down that start showing themselves for real here, though. I found a second yellow onion in this area, which means some of them have multiples to find. I get that that's to accommodate players who jump around more, but another thing is that sparklium requirements to unlock new areas are so low that I had access to the final area before day 10. One might think that's because I'm the best at beating the overworld, but most of the treasure is in caves, where everyone has unlimited time to explore. Caves, side quests, and most tasks around everywhere will net you more raw materials than you could ever need for all the bridges, and having a smaller squad means you ironically also lose less Pikmin. These are ways the game shows insecurity with itself. Like I was rambling about with the logo earlier, these sorts of measures feel like they want the game to not just be more ambitious, but maybe be too easy on purpose. Not just for kids, but for general audiences in general. When Pikmin 1 came out, Miyamoto said he wanted the game to be the new Mario. It wasn't. Pikmin has always struggled because it's tough to come to grips with for newbies. So the upgrades, abundance of collectibles, and low gates for story progress feel like the team's desire to make a large but easy game to finally get people to roll credits on a Pikmin game and hopefully get hooked on the way. I'm torn because I'd like a more challenging game, more in line with the first two entries, but I love the abundance of features here, and I want more people to get to know this world and gameplay that I love so much. It's 2 versus 1 there. I shouldn't really complain too much. Or should I? Oh, I'm getting heated. Never mind, I'm chill again. Thanks for bringing me back down to earth, Dick Van Dyke. Can I say that? Let me know down in the comments below. There's plenty to love about this area, I think. The Mamuda and creeping chrysanthemums return. It's fun to see classic creatures come back. And speaking of returning things, this is one of the biggest spoilers in the whole game. I'm not kidding. Skip ahead if you don't want to be spoiled. Man, I love songs with melodies. I love these mushroom platforms that look like the jars you've been smashing with Ochi, so you get the visual cue and are rewarded with a path forward. Freaking cool. Also, Arlo is in this game.
But honestly, I might not be able to look at him the same again.
The Dandori challenges are a small step up here. They're still easy, but more satisfying because they account for Ochi's and Pikmin types' different specialties. The Dandori battle is even easier than the first area though, because they introduce ways to get double points. I'm just gonna be mopping the floor this whole fucking game, huh? So after 11 days, I've 100%ed 2 of the game's areas. In this video game, there's a number of control changes that are intriguing compared to previous video games, while also being contentious among fans. See, in the Switch remasters of 1 and 2 they released, you can aim using gyro, but only when whistling or throwing. I think that's been pretty well liked by players, and I think it's a good way to prevent 3 Deluxe's issue, where the cursor would drift and force you to recenter it every 1.24 seconds. What's pissing people off is an auto lock-on that kicks in when you approach stuff. I would say that most most of the time. There's only like one thing around, so it's perfectly fine. But when there's tons of enemies, it'll just snap to whatever it wants, and it can be frantic trying to figure out what you're even aiming at. I'm usually okay with just canceling and giving myself a chance to reorganize, but this really needs ironing out. I know the idea was to be more accessible because Pikmin 4 needs to strike it big, but I understand people getting annoyed with this, especially if they don't know what targeting is or how to cycle. And even though I'm mostly okay with this change, yeah, it should have been a toggle in the options menu. This isn't a new problem for Nintendo. It's clear we're nowhere near them having comprehensive accessibility options in any of their games ever. It's really depressing compared to the great social strides present in the hub area. Like maybe you could represent and also really be there for different types of people. The items you purchase are in a pull-up menu. It's awkward to access. You have to squeeze Y and then it comes up with all these options a full second later. There's all your disposable stuff like bomb rocks. Pikmin don't have to carry them anymore. You can just yoink them out and grenade lob them. You can also use a drone to scout out a full area from up high, which is a sick option. And you get tons of abilities that can tell Pikmin to go home or come to you and know more about how many Pikmin are idle. See, these quality of life improvements rock. They're almost universally helpful because they can help you see ahead or can prevent Pikmin from lollygagging or dying at the end of the day. So you won't hear me complaining about them. Time rewinding is another story. I'm torn as fuck. If you need to, you can go back a couple of minutes when a bunch of your guys get squashed. So I don't know, I don't really like the feature. I think it clashes with Pikmin thematically and panders to a fully inexperienced audience, but it could be helpful for kids. And it's not like I'm gonna not use this feature if I'm having an issue. I love overcompensating for my failures. It's a feature that kind of breaks even for me, but I think I still lean towards not wanting to use it myself unless I'm being lazy. Okay, so we bumped into that red leafling again who is not letting up. They escaped again. We've also gotten even more other leaflings, but fortunately we rescued the doctor guy. He's been exploring at night, so if we help him out with some nighttime expeditions, we can finally start to cure the Dandori bros. That wasn't originally a Mario joke, but it works better than what was in my head. I'm gonna wait until I have some more leaflings to do those because I just don't really want to sort through all of my footage for this big review, to be honest. We're just gonna skip this for now. Sorry, everybody, I feel really bad. Sorry. Also, since we've gotten more people, the hub has gotten a little larger and a very special something is just lying there. It's a good reminder that Olimar is still out there somewhere. We don't know where he is. So let's go to the next area and keep looking. Man, the Switch is getting kind of old, huh? It's okay though, because this game is so pretty. Go off, Queen. This stage is extra nice to look at because of the great sand texture and great water effects. Pikmin 3 had a challenge stage that was beach themed, also a reference to the forest navel, but this is the first time we've had a full beach area, and it takes full advantage of the concept not only by having plenty of water and coral, but also by centering a large portion around a huge sandcastle with tight pathways. There's so many great details around it. The bucket used to make it is near the bottom, an area near the top is using a tarp for a little pool, and creatures with moving attacks have moved in, making those tight corridors dangerous. At our size, it feels like breaking into a fortress. Here's a wholly unique mechanic to this area. Every time noon passes, the tide ebbs, lowering all water throughout the entire place. This makes exploration easier for multiple Pikmin types, but also varies the level design, which is cool. Honestly, I'm shocked they haven't tried anything on this scale before. It's a new way to use the day system that affects micromanagement even further. I want more mechanics on this level in future installments, and heck, even later on in this game if that ends up happening. Even the caves introduce new ideas. Low temperatures that make your Pikmin huddle for warmth, some tricky floors that reward you with winged Pikmin if you figure the puzzle out, a fun disco-themed boss that has a tempo-boosting song attack that makes your Pikmin dance? Wait, sorry, I just had to say that like I was in a Nintendo Direct. The Seafloor Resort, which reminds of when Courtney Portnoy portrayed the formerly portly consort. And finally, the return of them. That dungeon also gives you purple Pikmin for reasons that are obvious if you've played 2, so we have a lot of different types at our command. Unfortunately, I'm starting to notice how situational most types can be in this game. The auto-select made me start noticing how some Pikmin are selected far more than others. It depends on the stage, of course, but I noticed how reds were being left in the dust more often than not in Arcadia and on the shores. Regardless, this area is pretty fantastic. Great set pieces, a level-wide mechanic that's never been done before, beautiful visuals, and oh man, I haven't even talked about the soundscape yet. The music is so lush with amazing texture. Anytime you hear a really floaty sound like this, that's an instrument called a pad. Pads are synths that hit notes for a while to add harmony or make the track feel like it has tons of space in it. This soundtrack has been making big use of them, and even if the melodies are lacking in this whole game so far, at least the music is as relaxing as any of its big sisters. Pikmin is over 20 years old. In fact, it can legally drink. Yo, anyone want a nectar? This means each entry has its own meta, and so tweaked or introduced or removed different types of Pikmin units. 4 not only introduces Ice Pikmin and another type exclusive to the night raids, it also lets you use all 7 previous types in the story mode. All 7 types. In terms of writing this section, we're also talking about a version of all of these that have been slowly adjusted over 20 years. I don't really want to bother with that, so I found someone who already did. I referred to Silohawk's Ultimate Pikmin 4 tier list, their words, not mine, to remember all the tweaks made to every type. They also made a different version prior to that, ranking the different Pikmin from each individual game as well. I'd highly recommend checking out both of these videos. Nah, who am I kidding? All you Pikmin Redditors already saw it. You guys could stick around here. Red Pikmin are still pretty useful when they're allowed to be in this game. Combat utility is still high. I did notice in the overworld that they weren't picked by the auto-select in most of the stages, which is fine because the caves make you pull them out. Something they have over other types is their new ability to grab this kindling to destroy barricades, a task that Ochi can't chip in on. The red Pikmin being able to do this makes up for low overworld use. Yellow Pikmin suffer because Ochi can help out with electricity, and because the auto lock-on means any type can clear distances if you position yourself just right. They can still help multitask with those things though, and they dig really fast. Like crazy fast. It is unreal, Engine 4. That's their main strength here, especially because electricity is obviously still not nearly as lethal as in Pikmin 2, and it never will be again, Nintendo learned. Blue Pikmin are still one of the best looking Pikmin designs in the series. Love these derpy dudes. Even though their use definitely tops off in Serene Shores, plenty of level design makes use of underwater terrain. They're most useful for multitasking, but in a game about multitasking, that's not so bad. They're mid, but the type of mid where I still like them. Purples haven't been front and center since 2, where they were one of the things that absolutely broke combat. Now that they're in a story mode again, they do dope damage and are probably your best bet for fighting and carrying, but they don't cause a shockwave when you hit them on the ground anymore. Ochi can hit hard and carry huge stuff too, but the purples are still really useful, especially in Dandori missions. White Pikmin fully suck. In Pikmin 2, they could poison enemies and take on poison hazards, but they could also see treasures underground and had the best dig speed and carrying speed. They were very, very valuable in that game. In 4, any Pikmin can start digging up buried treasure, and on top of that, white Pikmin dig slowly and can't take water shortcuts or fly. But on top of that, their damage is really low for normal combat unless they get eaten and killed. But at that rate, even if you see a poison foe, just make Ochi immune and have him deal with it. Whites have to be the worst in this game. Dwayne the Rock Pikmin are still really useful because you can beam the fuck out of enemies, and they can't get crushed still. or stabbed. They're also the main way to bash crystals, which even Ochi can't do, so they stick out for that. Not much to say about them, they're just a good type. Wings Pikmin are similar, where they've had some big debuffs because this game isn't built around them. So they can't grab stuff out of the water sometimes anymore, and sometimes their pathing makes them seem more helpless than a regular Pikmin, but they can fly, so they're okay. You don't really get to use them very much. The auto picker doesn't like to do that until way later, and even then they're just fine. I'm indifferent to them. I was at their freaking church in 3. I was worshiping the fuck out of these adorable little guys. I really do not care about them here, but that's only because I've converted to Ice Pikminism, baby! These guys can freeze bodies of water if you have enough, and can resist the cold in frigid caves, and destroy ice hazards. But you know what's even cooler? They can freeze enemies, and if they're frozen when defeated, they'll completely shatter. So while there is a consequence in that you have to decide if you want a corpse or not, we're doing a genocide route in this game. These guys look sick and also are sick. I'm a big ass fan. There's one more type to discuss, but we'll get to that later. Not too much later, so be patient. If you're mad, here's a video of the cat I live with being fucking stupid. What are you doing? I love him. Ochi is freaking awesome. It really is his world we're all living in. Ochi is a ride that can get all your Pikmin in one place and lets you swim over water or platform. Ochi serves as an extra Pikmin unit that can chomp at enemies and help carry things. Ochi serves as a second captain that can be sent places or controlled independently. Ochi has his own obstacles. Ochi can get immunity to pretty much every hazard and can carry a whole squad's weight. In summary, Ochi is epic. I might change religions again. When they revealed him in a trailer, I was worried he'd be broken and make the game way less fun. Don't get me wrong, Ochi's 100% busted, but he's great. I get to choose how OP he becomes, and more than that, you have to know how to use his stupid abilities to your advantage. Plus, he's an alien puppy dog. Damn! And in Pikmin Bloom, you could get an Ochi costume for your Mii. Damn! Honestly, if a feature like this doesn't exist in all future Pikmin games, it's a big step back. Ochi rocks and fits the game like a glove. More balancing or letting a player 2 be Ochi would be great, but what's here is amazing. I'm so in love with them. There hasn't been much more plot development. Red Leafling got away again, nothing new there. Hopefully we can corner them soon. I did want to let all of you know that Russ told us a childhood story about how his mom would blend pick carrots. This is actually a reference to that short film where the Pikmin think Olimar is blending them up when he's actually just juicing carrots. You've now learned something from this video. But before we take on this last area, we need to do some night expeditions. You're locked out of that final area until you do 3 of them, because after the 3rd one, you de-leafify the pilot Bernard, so you can finally save the entire rescue corps before the ending. The night expeditions are far from a burden that gatekeeps you though. In every Pikmin game, nightfall is a huge threat. Most larger enemies are nocturnal, so you better take off at sunset so they can't swarm you. If you ditch any Pikmin on the surface, they are fucking dead. So nighttime exploration has always been a huge pipe dream for Pikmin fans, with most speculating that maybe you could just stay on the surface but use different groups of Pikmin while the enemies are on the prowl. But from a developer point of view, you're looking at that in the design doc and you're like, so why count days then? When does the player switch areas? Why would we negate both of these things that are baked into the Pikmin formula? So night exploration became an activity that takes up a day by itself, but has a different goal to differentiate it. We have a horde or tower defense type mode using Pikmin mechanics, which lets the nighttime have a creepy atmosphere that lives up to previous depictions while also also having a frantic fun to it. Each area has raids where you protect one of the base points during a tight period of a few minutes. Enemies close in fast, usually in succession from all angles, while you protect this thing called the luminol, which gives us glow sap, which is used to cure the leaflings when you win. So you need to use the new glow Pikmin and work with Ochi. Glow Pikmin are unique units. They're invincible to everything and warp right back to you as soon as they're done working. They also have this ability to mush into a ball and launch at groups of enemies, stunning them before attacking, which is mega useful during these night missions. But it can also be useful in caves, since for every 5 glow Pikmin you spawn during the night, you can get 1 glow seed to toss out in a cave if you need some help. But all this makes it seem like the Bulbmen might really be gone for good. It's such a shame. Nintendo should try to find a new use for them. I get it, but I love them and it stinks. RIP my babes. Doing these night missions also gets you extra pup drive because you're curing leaflings, sometimes 2 per night if there's 2 luminols. And since the missions are so short, it's a great way to rack that up and get Ochi some new abilities. So between grabbing a bunch of star bits for more glow soldiers, activating trick knolls, making sure Ochi doesn't get clobbered to death, you gotta run back and forth as fast as you can in a desperate attempt to hold off foes until sunrise. And it is exhilaratingly stressful. Finishing one of these things feels great, and the music helps you know what you should be most worried about on a dime. Whenever the luminol is getting attacked, it ramps up into this chromatic, freaky string section that makes you jump. Other than that, it's a very effective creepy ambience, which works well too. Yanni also gets to let his creepy ass shine in the pale moonlight, calling the player new blood, cackling to himself all the time, and praising you for making sure no more creatures are skittering or hopping. He seems like someone who doesn't want to hurt people, but just has this creepy apathetic fascination with the forces of nature to the degree that he already has a cure by the time you found him. He already went out at night and figured this shit out. The last few stages get fairly difficult and are some of the most challenging content in the entire game. I love when Pikmin games push me to my limits. Including a night mode in some form was honestly an inevitability in this series, and seeing it be a fully new gameplay style is praiseworthy. Yet another way this game proves it took 10 years. But, you know, I would have liked an endless mode. I played Catherine recently, and I'm thinking of something like the Babel mode. You could have different stages, settings for 1 or 2 luminols, and then just let the player survive for as long as possible. I would love to watch high score runs of that. This is one of my biggest complaints with Pikmin 4. It includes stuff that could obviously be a full extra mode within the story mode, but doesn't allow it to exist. Only the 2-player Dandori battle is there, which is a lot of fun, but the mission mode was a staple of Pikmin 3, and seeing those totally absent as well as something to turn the night expedition into an extra mode is such a missed opportunity. While writing this video, I kept holding out for the release of DLC with these modes, but it never happened. If it does, hell yeah, Pikmin 4 DLC review, the most Pikmin DLC that ever Pikmin DLC'd, is a bona fide project and probably a huge hit. But if not, it'll be a huge scar on this game's smooth, baby-like skin forever. But Jesus Lord in heaven above, I spent like 9 days doing this shit for the first 3 areas, and Ochi's tail changed somehow. I don't know why this happened, but Ochi seems fine, so we don't need to worry about it. Probably. That red leafling's probably hidden themselves impossibly well by now though, so let's hurry up and chase them down. Oh, we're in the house. Call me doctor the way I'm into house. To make progress here, we'll have to navigate around its tricky verticality and tight spaces. A huge house is both aesthetically and design-wise very different compared to every previous area in all 4 games. The highest heights of this stage are way out of reach for any of them. You gotta focus on what path goes where. All the furniture being far smaller than most of the natural platforms makes combat the most dangerous it's been yet. The stage has 2 main gimmicks on top of this to really add some stress. Yes, the first is Moss, who will follow you around the stage and whistle to steal your Pikmin from you. You can attack her, but this could be messy as she can run away and dump your Pikmin all over the floor like a literal bitch. Taking her out means you're free to go explore, but you have to stop whatever you're doing for a few minutes to get that done. It's a lighter stalking mechanic compared to the Water Wraith, which just outright kills Pikmin, but can still cause you a huge problem if you're caught off guard. The other mechanic just pertains to the story. The red leafling turns out to be hiding in this safe, so we need to find playing cards matching the suits to get the combo. You'll find these pretty naturally as you do other things, but it gives a good incentive for exploration. What happens once it opens will come in a bit, because I want to talk about some other stuff first. I love the feeling of this place. The light gets let in naturally through the window, so it still lets you keep track of the time of day. The house has strewn accessories and luggage in the corners, which paints this picture of whoever owns this house having been gone for a while. With how many creepy crawlies there are and all the treasures in this and Pikmin 2, maybe an apocalypse didn't happen too long ago. Pikmin lore, Pikmin lore! The music also invokes a childlike curiosity, which all the characters must be feeling as they're seeing a truly alien structure to them. There's not a super tight melody or anything. This mixtape's about to suck dick, isn't it? But there's at least something to follow with the accordion. So despite the danger, it stays fun as you peek into crevices and climb this bizarro fortress. Speaking of music, here's another big spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1. Dude, this game's so freaking awesome. What a cool idea for a stage for this to be in. It fits in as a treasure. Like, some grandma probably brought it over. Or it's like from a millennial with an Etsy shop. Or just $75, you can get the ocarina songs at a custom music box. Anyways, guys, support my friend's small business and buy Nude Balm on Etsy, please. In fact, it reminds me of the Christmas stage from Pikmin 3. Except this is a huge step up. That was just a video game level using human things as obstacles or platforms. This is a house. It's meant to have a somewhat logical layout and feel like a living space, and it does feel pretty concrete. The floating platforms from the caves are a bit dicey to me, but the only thing I really dislike being here is the clay wall. Why does everything you make with the raw materials have to turn into clay? I really do not get it. The stuff turns into anything Russ wants when he makes items and gear, so why can't the sprinkler handles and walls and stuff turn into metal or wood? Like, the idea already makes you put logic aside for gameplay, so just let it fit aesthetically. If I came home and saw a huge glob of clay by my TV, I would literally call an exorcist and not have sex with him because he's Catholic. At least he's not Mormon. If he was Mormon, I'd have to soak. And that's just so much extra prep work. Inside the safe is the final Dandori battle with the red leafling. Oh, okay, the game doesn't even care. Yeah, we have to beat Olimar off one last time. The final stage is still as easy as the others, especially because it introduces the sneak bomb. Using these makes the enemy onion turn points into collectibles, so that player can either recollect them or you can steal them. So with minimal effort, we knock out Olimar. Moss runs away, weirdly unconcerned after all they're working together, but who cares, we're going home. So after curing Olimar, we get our typical goodbye and thank you Pikmin ending. Then we get to watch them hang out for the credits. It's kinda cute. The music is nice to listen to as it riffs on the main title theme in cool ways. It also fits the credits visual motif of following the daytime through the dusk into nighttime. Very cute way to end the game, and I'm sure it gives the early dippers a nice chance to drop out of the story. Is what I would say if this freak didn't show up and start hanging out with Moss in the end. What? How do we have an excuse to go back and deal with this revelation? Well, you remember the leaf? It weirdly prevents Ochi from leaving the planet and makes him deathly ill up in the atmosphere. So we need to rescue more castaways to find a vet from Kopai and cure him. The game has 2 full additional areas to complete to get the true ending, which I will cover in full detail. However, The game introduces 2 huge side quests we should take on before we forget. Olimar recounts the tale of his first attempt at getting his ship parts back, which, coupled with the intro, confirms that this story does in fact take place in an alternate timeline branching off from the bad ending of 1, thus expanding the epic lore of the Pikmin multimedia franchise. We're challenged to collect 30 ship parts within 15 days, exploring the 4 areas from the main campaign. We're also restricted to red, yellow, and blue Pikmin. So basically, we have the mechanics and stages of Pikmin 4 with the format of Pikmin 1. You gotta be on your Dandori A game at all times. It's so cool to start at different points on the original maps and navigate new obstacles with less equipment than before. Since Olimar isn't on a team, you're automatically given new gear between days, and you don't waste time at the hub either. You can just select an area and boom, you're there for the day, just like in the original. Speaking of that, all the best musical moments from Pikmin 1 get remade here, giving me a heart nostalgia attack. I can't breathe right now. Bits and pieces of old stage themes from 1 also get mixed into 4s for some great tracks that keep the pace high, but we'll listen once I'm home from the hospital. I seriously love this entire mode for the fan service and the tight focus on strategy. I'm finally getting the thrills I got from planning my day out, but then tossing a Pikmin wrong and wasting time that I get when I play 1 again, something 2 and 3 couldn't match for me. Like, check out this boss moment where I barely got this part back before the end of a day. Ugh! It just doesn't feel as great in 2 or 3 or 4 as compared to this format. This is perfect as a post-game mode. If the devs don't want these games to be like the first and want to bring in new players by letting them explore, that's fine. But including this lets the game have its cake and eat it too. This challenge ties with Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 3's mission mode as the peak of the series gameplay for me. You get great rewards for doing this too. You get the YO crystal as a treasure that glows off whenever you're yakking off with a bro, which is whatever. But you also teach Ochi his swallow move, where he can gulp any treasure down and then march back to the base at a decent pace. You also unlock the Leaf Sage's Cave, the other great side quest. Here there's 10 floors of tough Dandori stuff that makes you awesome. And also get white and purple onions. Probably one of the best rewards you could ever get. Fine, let's do this. There's some very clever stuff in here, like some fun stages where you need to figure out how to effectively defeat all the enemies, remixes of other Dandori stages, that sort of thing. There's some duds, especially the one where you have to toss purple Pikmin to kill 99 creatures, which is made a nightmare by the auto lock on. If we could aim independently, this would be over instantly. Mostly it's a solid inclusion. I especially liked when you needed to use Ochi to tank a bomb explosion to get through a crystal barrier. That's a mechanic you're conditioned to deal with in one way, and it's so cool when a game makes you reverse engineer your own thinking without actually changing the mechanic at all. And the stages where you get the white and purple onions are amazing too, especially the last one for the purple onion, where so many tasks are in your path and the water wraith returns. You have to decide what dangers to skirt around in order to get the onion to the end without hopefully losing too many Pikmin. It's genius. Both activities are great additions. They're truly the cherry on top of an already expansive post-game, especially if you do them right away, because you give yourself more helpful tools. Swallowing and being able to grow white and purple Pikmin instead of having to protect them like a soccer mom outside of caves are worthy of any Pikmin superfan's arsenal. I can't wait to see what the more traditional post-game area has in store. I bet the new areas will be gorgeous. Just to get a negative out of the way, why did they change the font? What was wrong with the old font? It was bubbly and delightful. This font, no, this whole UI, it's robotic and boring. I'm playing Pikmin, not Mass Effect. Guys, this is the only negative in terms of visuals. Pikmin 4 is so fucking beautiful. From its inception, Pikmin has always been pushing Nintendo hardware to be as high fidelity as possible, but never just for the sake of it. Pikmin's world obviously being modeled after the planet Mars, caves, tries to create a convincing habitat for the creatures, and to sell that atmosphere, you need to push for somewhat lifelike environments. Being the latest entry, Pikmin 4 obviously excels here. From the sand and water and serene shores to all the incredible detail in the hero's hideaway, this series has never looked better. The caves don't have quite the same menacing liminal atmosphere that they used to, however, but it's debatable how intentional that was, at least graphically, or if the earlier 3D graphics just facilitated it. And I can't think of a better segue here, but the caves definitely achieved that intentionally using a whole different medium. That's not up for debate. It's time for the Pikmin 4's OST was produced by a team headed up by Kenta Nagata, with music coming from Asuka Hayazaki and Soshi Abe. The first two are kind of all-stars. They've been with the company for a while. Nagata has had his keyboard fingers up and down the Mario Kart series. Hayazaki started with Four Swords Adventures. I'm sorry, that's not your fault, babe. And has worked on other Zeldas, Animal Crossing, Wii Fit, Ring Fit, Splatoon, New Super Mario Bros. And 3D Land, and naturally, Pikmin 3. Soshi Abe only joined the company starting with the Switch, making music for Breath of the Wild's expansion. He also did stuff for the Brain Age game they vomited out for Switch that nobody owns, and Metroid Dread. It's so cool to find a talent this fresh in a big game like this, but he only got put on this project because he worked on some stuff for Pikmin 3 Deluxe's new content. The only one of the three to not have worked on Pikmin before is Kenta Nagata, the lead guy. This is very interesting. Hajime Wakai, who wrote the music for 1 and worked heavily on 2 and 3, is nowhere to be found in the credits. His compositions return in great ways, but not by his hands. Most of the new stuff takes a very different direction. Pikmin has always leaned more ambient musically, but the original trilogy still managed to have melodies or elements of catchiness to them. Each song has something to latch onto, for better or for worse. Like in Pikmin 2, they were making all these weird roots to play at random intervals for the cave ambience, which made the caves extremely creepy and bizarre. In Pikmin 4, you're just chilling underground. Pikmin 4's main areas really don't have anything to munch on. Don't get me wrong, well-produced ambience is still well-produced, but it's also just ambience. I'm a very melodically driven listener and musician, so I don't want those featured in this mixtape. The game does pick up the slack in the Dandori battles and challenges though. There's some pretty catchy stuff here that I enjoy. Olimar's Shiptail, as I mentioned, is probably the highlight of the score for me. Basically, all of Pikmin 1's soundtrack is back in a new way, with all the amazing stings and jingles being rearranged. But my favorite thing is that bits of the theme for the impact site get spliced into the soundscape of Sunspeckled Terrace. The Forest of Hope gets mashed into Blossoming Arcadia. And the Distant Springs weird sounds get mixed into Serene Shores. But even outside of that fan service, the whole compositions for each of these three areas offer so much more to dig into than the rest of the game, like Serene Shore's funky triplet beats or the Blossoming Arcadia's uplifting string backings. anything else memorable about the game's music is something I'm either omitting to at least keep something unspoiled, or something I already have spoiled. Pikmin has some great music in it, and it stinks that the players who dipped right after the credits definitely aren't hearing all the best stuff. And also, I can't believe I didn't write about this. I swear I wrote about this. Why did they not just remix the original Piklopedia theme? Like, that's straight up one of my favorite songs. It's probably one of the best songs in Pikmin. And they just, like, omitted it so they could play this bleepy bloopy crap. Like, compare the two of them. Like, it's not even a fair fight. It's really awful. Anyway, let's move on. We're finally ready to search for the copites being taken by that son of a bitch. Louis is well known as an antagonist by this point in the series, but what the hell is he doing taking our girl Moss? I just like Moss. I don't even care if she's homophobic. If she just hangs out with Ochi, she'll come around, I swear. Exploring this area is mad chill. This is ironic because it has a very dog days of summer atmosphere. It just feels so hot and humid, and the music surprisingly pulls its weight. It reminds me of the Forest Navel, where I'm not humming it all the time, but I'll at least remember it after I'm done playing. The area has more of the sprinklers from earlier in the game and these hay bale obstacles. Oh my god, the reds are coming out of the onion again? It's been like 20 hours. This, in conjunction with beefier enemies and more platforming and even more shortcuts, means that this is easily the most challenging area so far, fitting for the post-game. But between this and the house, I feel like I'm finally being treated like a guy who's played Pikmin 3 about as much as I've played Breath of the Wild. My skills are being asked of in the overworld, and not just the Dandori challenges. I was being efficient earlier because I wanted to, but now it feels like I need to prepare for fights. It's great. In the center, there's this huge stone grill as a set piece. It really adds to the whole place. Love this shit. It would have been thematically appropriate to have Louis up here since he's obsessed with food, but there's just some Dandori guy. That's fine though. Louis' presence is felt before you find him. Reading cave descriptions makes it obvious that Louis is writing them. Oh my god. He's more off-putting than my aunt or any Smallville antagonist. You know, I've been watching that show lately, and Lex Luthor is a fucking Redditor and he gets violent, but even Superman isn't immune from the craziness. He gets red rocks in his skin in one episode and turns evil, so he walks up to his crush and he's like, "Hey babe, you know what I'm crazy about? You jacking me off." And then they start like dating later in the season. I should pitch a show to the CW instead of doing YouTube. I'd probably be a gajillionaire right now. Since Superman was evil, we should have found all the freaks of the weeks and smacked their heads off so they couldn't terrorize anymore, like the football coach that lights all the sprinklers on fire, or the fascist student body president that commands bees, like that boss from Pikmin 3. See, I just brought it full circle. The caves are about as tough as the overworld now, but they don't feel nearly as aggravating as 2's, but the Dandori stages are really strutting ahead with challenge. I love not finishing these little stages and being like, damn, if only I tried a slightly different thing. After a while, we finally catch up with Louis, but he tries to do the same song and dance Leaflingified Olimar was doing. Something is seriously off here. The Kopite doesn't turn into a Leafling. I've been slacking off on those nighttime missions though, so honestly, thank Christ I have one last one to do. After kicking Louis' dump rump at a Dandori battle, he takes off and we talk with the Kopite and his colleague that we saved earlier. Fuck, I didn't show you that. There was a guy that we saved earlier. Basically, they were drinking raw glow sap, making them immune. So the vet we're still looking for is safe from Dandori slavery. The Kopites explain that they remember a big dog taking them deeper into the woods, so we go to our actual final area, for real this time, I promise, in search of them. Dang, the primordial thicket, huh? Bill Trennan busted out the thesaurus for that one. It reminds me of how the Spanish name for the bathroom Mario Kart track is accelerated toilet. Genius. The atmosphere is just as thick here as in the Hearth, but instead of feeling like a warm national park, the muted colors in the grass and mud make everything feel really icky and sweaty like a rainforest. The leafling designs have felt jungly with all the plant growths and clacky percussion in their theme musics, so I guess you could say we're really getting to the root of things. Earlier I was complaining about how easy this game was and that I was worried it would just stay at that level for the whole thing. But that was wicked unfair. First of all, of course the second area was gonna be on the easier side of things, duh Drew. And the house was plenty challenging with the small platforms and moss stalking you. So players that quit early did get roughed up a little, and everybody else gets a post game to meet the expectations of. Even if earlier games were more brutal, this game does get tougher. There's just a smaller margin for error. Pikmin 4 is not the brain-dead game I accused it of being, especially not here at the end. This is by far the most difficult area. It asks a lot of your planning, with the 3 bases being far away from most tasks, and there are lots of obnoxious enemies everywhere. Knowing the layout and getting the jump on enemies is essential here. Another banger and a sea of bangers. This is where you get your whites and pinks in the field to help out, and while winged Pikmin are nerfed, they're still plenty helpful. Whites really blow their time to shine though. You'd think with all the poisonous enemies and mushrooms around they'd be a perfect fit, but you know who else is immune to poison except 10 times stronger and can't permanently die? Yeah, Ochi's the goat of this area. I'd rather not have to bother with the white Pikmin at all. I also noticed that after the first few areas they stop hiding things in the ground for Ochi to sniff out. I get the house not having that, but these last 2 areas not having any baffles me since it was a big shared thing between the first 3 areas. If anything, those should have been cut and included in the post game. Burying stuff seems like something to pad out a late game secret level to me. A gimmick this area does have is the return of a 1000 weight treasure, aka 100 purple boys. You can grind them out in a cave or use the fancy new onion, but either way it's cool they included this throwback to Pikmin 2's final area. As far as standout stuff goes though, I feel like this final area peters out on interesting ideas for caves. There's only a couple normal ones that are fairly simple and an abundance of Dandori challenges. The dungeon crawling runs out of steam here in a very transparent way that I think is interesting. After being gone in the last game, cave dungeon crawling makes a return from Pikmin 2. If you recall, I do not like the cave dungeon crawling in Pikmin 2. Caves were fucking ruthless in 2. When I was actually trying towards the start of the game, I would restart floors over and over again to get through with minimal Pikmin loss. Just all sorts of things happening that made the game very stressful to me. People say Pikmin 1 is overwhelming, but I always felt that more from playing Pikmin 2. There's good stress and bad stress, and before Pikmin came out, I knew that 2 was a fluke because 1 and 3 stuck to a more efficiency-based good stress formula instead of a survival-based bad stress one. Before is clearly doing all the things it does to make the game as large as possible, so it's a logical creative decision to reintroduce caves. I was apprehensive going in because I felt it was likely I'd have lots of that bad stress coming back, but the caves in 4 aren't stressful. If anything, I feel more of a positive indifference towards them. Caves aren't randomly generated anymore. They're all traditionally designed and balanced to help a player get through them like a normal level and not a fucking unregulated haunted house. You can leave caves whenever and restart from unlocked floors, and even ditching a cave will let you keep the treasures. Enemies don't respawn until you 100% a cave. Another aspect we've already gone over is how in 2, the caves had freaky weirdo music that added some good scary atmosphere at least. Here the music is usually pretty chill, so you're really exploring a liminal space that doesn't quite feel like one. I like some of the stranger themes like the aquarium and toy box, but like in 2, these all get used multiple times, so by the end of the game they don't feel special, and the handcrafted level design doesn't feel necessary when you make multiple caves that accomplish the same things. I think the Dandori stages that use these same themes make the best use of them, more so than the bigger dungeons. Pikmin 4's approach makes it feel like I'm just exploring the same as I do on the surface but without a time limit. They're infinitely more tolerable than in Pikmin 2, but there's almost no bite to them, especially towards the start of the game. As caves get tougher, they do get more fun, so I guess there should be a happy medium that lasts the whole time. Honestly, I would be okay with caves as dungeon crawlers being gone again in the next game. So what this game really proves is that you can make me hate Pikmin caves less, but you can't make me like them better. This is a step in the right direction, but I'm still really bleh on it overall. Hey, I just wanted to say thanks real quick. You didn't have to watch the whole video, but if you're here at this point, it means a lot to me. I hope you're feeling comfy and that you're drinking water. Let's close this thing out. After whooping Louie's butt again, he loses his wig and runs away. Moss feels guilty and finally comes back to base to rejoin Olimar, and we save the vet. She tells us that we need dog DNA to make dog medicine for Ochi, and that the big dog that took her away was actually not Moss, so we need to chase Louie again into a final cave to try to find out where this other dog is. Side note here, I really like this little piece that plays when the Kopai crew are all reuniting. Not because it reminds me of 3 or anything, really, but to me it sounds like something out of the 2000 Zelda games, like Twilight Princess or Spirit Tracks. I wonder why, lol. Other side note, these 3 Kopites looking like but not being the protags from 3 does in fact confirm we are in an alternate timeline. The Cavern for a King is the longest cave at 20 floors long. The average is like 5 or 6. I mean, there are safe floors, so not all of them are super meaty. It's not a full marathon. You can exit and restart from safe floors, so you'll be able to hold onto a big squad for the entire thing if you exit. I do like that the safe floors also bring back the music and vibes that the rest floors in 2's caves have. I may not like Pikmin 2, but we love some good fan service and good music. Most of the floors involve some kind of combat challenge, so if you try hard enough, or you could just cheat, you can make your way through it with very little stress. Really, only the first floor is unfairly difficult. I hate this poisonous puff stool. It keeps reviving all the little minions around it, so it's just tough and obnoxious. Almost impossible to not lose Pikmin to. But the other floors are mainly just a little challenging instead of brutal or hard. There's also a ton of treasures. 48 in fact. So if you're completing this game like I kind of mostly am, you need to pay the fuck attention, okay? My favorite one is this one, and it is your last spoiler warning in this fucking video. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Damn, this game kicks ass. On the penultimate floor, there are candy pop buds to help you get some ice, red, and yellow Pikmin, since in caves you can have more than 3 types. So we have a huge, varied squad to deal with whatever could be on the final floor. The final boss is Louie's dog. Conceptually, it makes a lot of sense. You've been fighting with Louie for a while now on foot, but now we have a dog fight where you're the underdog. And it's a long fight where you have to whittle its health down multiple times. It has a regular form, then swaps to ice, electricity, fire, and then a poison form where it also flies. I don't know if this is a nod to white and winged Pikmin both having fly eyeballs, but the dog turns green during this phase too. So I just don't know at this point. It's getting a bit late, and this is kind of frantic. Can it die already? Alright, nice! So we capture Louie and get this big dog collar. Then the next day, Ochi gets cured. Olimar decides not to cure Moss and leaves her behind though. This is her planet after all, and sometimes you just shouldn't mess with nature. The Pikmin try to fly up with us, but Moss is more than willing to become their leader, and it seems like the huge dog is actually really friendly and wants to join them. What a good boy. This is another very nice but typical ending, but like, what else are they gonna do? I say that in a less sassy way when thinking of a Pikmin 5, which they do tease in this ending, thank God. Pikmin 4 feels like a massive reset for basically all aspects of the series. Control, camera angle, scale, Ochi, and a focus on implementing past concepts in a story context. These things are all as awesome as my Ape Escape video. When this game came out in July of 23, I 100%ed it by putting in 40 hours within a week. I had several complaints about the story, which are obviously shallow but still an interesting talking point, and the length and low difficulty. This playthrough kind of resolved those for me because I recorded and wrote about it over a couple of months. Now I know not to care about the story, and if anything, a timeline split feels funnier and more fitting here in a cartoony sci-fi world instead of a beloved fantasy one. The difficulty actually was more well balanced than I initially thought. The game may start too easy, but even with all the upgrades, you're gonna have to outsmart enemies before you can insta-annihilate them. The game is easier than the originals, but the difficulty curve is well done and more deliberate than I gave it credit for. The length is still a little exhausting, but I can just pick this game up when I'm in the mood instead of binge playing. I had other complaints that are more valid. The auto lock-on is annoying, and a lack of extra modes, so far, are clear oversights. I really hope they're added in later, because with those flaws, the game is held back a little bit. Pikmin has always had weird controls too, and those can't get patched out, so maybe that's just part of the experience. Pikmin 4 is an excellent game with a massive amount of fun to be had. I'd prefer a 5th entry to make time management matter a little more and fix my issues with the controls and caves and whatever else, but 4 itself will be a favorite of mine for years. Like, it feels like it took 10 years to make this game. You can feel the effort, and the length makes the playthrough feel beefy enough that the wait between this and the next won't be nearly as agonizing as it was before. But saying that, hopefully it's just 3 or 4 years instead of like 10. Actually, I don't think I could handle 10 years again. Save me.